Hi everyone, I'm Miss B. Hanley, and today we are finishing The Giver by Lois Lowry, chapters 16 through 23. And we are going to just talk a little bit about the book where we left off. And I think it was the first stream I did with this book, um, we watched the trailer for the movie. We watched the trailer of the Giver movie, and we started it, but I didn't actually finish it in that stream. So this time we're going to watch the whole thing and compare it just with what we know happens in the book. Currently, right now, we are listening to the soundtrack from the movie, The Giver. And it's pretty good. It's not very upbeat or relaxing or really for reading at all right now, but we'll turn it off before we get into reading. But first, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the book itself. I understand, Dagon. Thank you. Thank you for letting us know, and I hope you have a good trip and drive safe. Thank you for staying and watching while you're here. Appreciate it. We're going to just talk a little bit about the book and what we read last time in chapters 8 through 15. That is, not 18 through 15, 8 through 15. And we're going to talk about Jonas and what he has experienced so far. He is the main character of this book, and he was selected at the very beginning. He was selected in his ceremony of 12 to be the receiver of memory, and he never really understood what it was. He thought, it was obviously special. It was a special selection by his community, and he was chosen instead of assigned a job, which is very different than the community that Jonas lives in. It's different from what they expect. So he has currently gone through his training as the receiver of memory, and he realizes that basically he's one of the people in the community, one of the only people in the community who basically gets memories of the past, of the world as it was before this community was created. And it's opened up a whole new set of questions about his community. He's really concerned about some of these things because some of the memories that he's getting are really happy and joyful and full of love. And he wonders, why can't we have these memories in our community? But he also gets memories of pain and suffering and hardship. And he realizes that obviously the good comes with the bad with these memories. And if you were to release all the memories to the community, that it would be chaos and it would be bad for the community because everyone would be burdened by these horrible, sad emotions. And, the community doesn't want that. And the Giver explains this all to him. So we left off where Jonas had just received a really painful, suffering memory of a young boy who died in warfare, right? He was a soldier, and Jonas sees this young man die before him of thirst, of some other injury that he received in the war. I'm gonna skip this song. It's a little okay. Perfect. End credits. That's gotta be a soothing song. But basically, this memory that Jonas had just received before we stopped reading last stream was so painful and hurtful. The Giver himself was just trying to get rid of it. He was so racked with pain and suffering over this memory that he gives the memory to Jonas, and the Giver asks Jonas to forgive him because he knows how horrible that memory was. And it's got to be, especially for Jonas, who's 12 years old. He's never before experienced this kind of pain and suffering before. He doesn't even understand why it happens. There's no war where he lives. There's no fighting or battles or starvation or thirst. Everything's provided for. So it was a very, very strange memory for him to receive. And it was also probably extremely painful. So that is where we're going to pick up today. After Jonas receiving his most painful memory from the Giver so far, the memory of war. And yeah, we're going to just jump into it. Okay, so let me pause. Let me turn down the music a little bit here. And let us go through the library door into the world of the book. We're being transported now into the giver. And after Jonas receives his most hurtful and painful memory from the giver, he now is dealing with the after effects of that. Okay, chapter 16. Jonas did not want to go back. He didn't want the memories, didn't want the honor, didn't want the wisdom, didn't want the pain. He wanted his childhood again. Uh-oh. My highlights are messing up again. That's all right. He wanted his childhood again. His scraped knees and ball games, he sat in his dwelling alone, watching through the window, seeing children at play, citizens bicycling home from uneventful days at work, ordinary lives free of anguish because he had been selected, as others before him had, to bear their burden. But the choice was not his. He returned each day to the annex room. The giver was gentle with him for many days following the terrible shared memory of war. There are so many good memories, their giver reminded Jonas, and it was true. By now, Jonas had experienced countless bits of happiness, things he had never known before. He had seen a birthday party with one child singled out and celebrated on his day. So that now he understood the joy of being individual, special, unique, and proud, right? Because Jonas and his community, they don't talk about people's individual unique traits. They focus on the community as the group. Yes, Dagon. So the receiver is what Jonas is right now. And the giver is who he becomes when there's a new receiver, right? So there's always one receiver and there's always one giver. And so the receiver doesn't become the giver until there's a new receiver in training to be given memories. So eventually Jonas will grow up and become the giver and have to do the same thing to another young person, like the giver has to do to him, give these memories. He had visited museums and seen paintings filled with all the colors he could now recognize and name. In one ecstatic memory, he had ridden a gleaming brown horse across a field that smelled of damp grass and had dismounted beside a small stream from which both he and the horse drank, cold, clear water. Now he understood about animals, and in the moment that the horse turned from the stream and nudged Jonas's shoulder affectionately with his head, he perceived the bond between animal and human. He had walked through woods and sat at night beside a campfire. Although he had, through the memories, learned about the pain of loss and loneliness, now he gained, too, an understanding of solitude and its joy. So going through all of these memories, Jonas is able to experience different types of emotions that he's never experienced before because his community is so structured and kind of rigid the way that it's set up. Everybody kind of lives content lives. No one really has really, really high emotions or really, really low emotions. Everyone just kind of lives in this sort of contentment. They're happy, but it's not like super ecstatic happiness. But in the memories that Jonas receives from the giver, these are happy memories. They're ecstatic memories, right? Of riding a horse and knowing how it feels to be bonded with an animal, right? To have an animal bond, because there are no animals in Jonas's community either. So to know that they're real is really eye-opening to him. And of course, although he had learned about the memories of pain and loneliness, right? He is also still very lonely in his community when he's tried to give people memories or help them see color and it doesn't work. He has to do his training all alone. The giver is the only person who knows about it. And it makes him extremely lonely. And this is only added on by the fact that he's getting memories of loneliness, but also understanding how being alone can sometimes be a good thing and be nice to be alone by yourself, right? So it's interesting that he's getting all these emotions and it's shaping who he is and his understanding of the world. And it's changing everything he's experienced. So it's all brand new to him. And, let's see what happens. What is your favorite? Jonas asked the giver. You don't have to give it away yet, he added quickly. Just tell me about it so I can look forward to it, because I'll have to receive it when your job is done. The giver smiled. Lie down, he said. I'm happy to give it to you. Jonas felt the joy of it as soon as the memory began. Sometimes it took a while for him to get his bearings, to find his place, but this time he fit right in and felt the happiness that pervaded the memory. He was in a room filled with people. It was warm, with a firelight glowing on the hearth. He could see through a window that outside it was night and snowing. There were colored lights, red, green, and yellow, twinkling from a tree which was oddly inside the room. On a table, lighted candles stood in a polished golden holder and a cast of soft, flickering glow. He could smell things cooking, and he heard soft laughter. A golden-haired dog lay sleeping on the floor. On the floor were packages wrapped in brightly colored paper and tied with gleaming ribbons. As Jonas watched, a small child began to pick up the packages and pass them around the room to other children, to adults, who were obviously parents, and to an older, quiet couple, man and woman, who sat smiling on a couch, together on a couch. While Jonas watched, the people began one by one to untie the ribbons of the packages, to unwrap the bright papers, open the boxes, revealing toys and clothing and books. There were cries of delight. They hugged one another. The small child went and sat on the lap of the old woman, and she rocked him and rubbed her cheek against his. Jonas opened his eyes and lay contentedly on the bed, still luxuriating in the warm and comforting memory. It had been there, all the things he had learned to treasure. "What did you perceive?" the giver asked. "Warmth," Jonas replied, "and happiness. And let me think. Family. That it was a celebration of some sort, a holiday. And something else. I can't quite get the word for it. It'll come to you. Who were the old people? Why were they there?" It had puzzled Jonas, seeing them in the room. The old of the community did not ever leave their special place, the house of the old, where they were so well cared for and respected. They were called grandparents. Grandparents? Grandparents. It means parents of the parents, long ago. Back and back and back, Jonas began to laugh. So actually there could be parents of the parents of the parents of the parents? The giver laughed too. That was right. That's right. It's a little like looking at yourself in a mirror, looking at yourself, looking in a mirror. Jonas frowned. But my parents must have had parents. I've never thought about it before. Who were my parents of the parents? Where are they? You could go look in the Hall of Open Records. You'd find the names, but think, son. If you apply for children, then who will be their parents of the parents? Who will be their grandparents? My mother and father, of course. And where will they be? Jonas thought. "Oh," he said slowly, "when I finish my training and become a full adult, I'll be given my own dwelling. And then when Lily does a few years later, she'll get her own dwelling, and maybe a spouse and children if she applies for them. And then mother and father, that's right. As long as they're still working and contributing to the community, they'll go live with the other childless adults, and they won't be a part of my life anymore. And after that, when the time comes, they'll go to the house of the old," Jonas went on. He was thinking out loud, "and they'll be well cared for and respected. And when they're released, there will be a celebration, which you won't attend," the giver pointed out. "No, of course not, because I won't even know about it. By then I'll be so busy with my own life, and Lily will too. So our children, if we have them, won't know who their parents of the parents are either. It seems to work pretty well that way, doesn't it? The way we do it in our community?" Jonas asked. "I just didn't realize there wasn't any other way until I received the memory." "It works," the giver agreed. Jonas hesitated. "I certainly like the memory, though. I can see why it's your favorite. I couldn't quite get the word for the whole feeling of it, the feeling that was so strong in the room." "Love," the giver told him. Jonas repeated it. Love. It was a word and concept new to him. They were both silent for a minute. Then Jonas said, "Giver?" "Yes." "I feel very foolish saying this. Very, very foolish." "No need. Nothing is foolish here. Trust the memories and how they make you feel." "Well," Jonas said, looking at the floor, "I know you don't have the memory anymore because you gave it to me, so maybe you won't understand this. I will. I am left with a vague wisp of that one, and I have many other memories of families and holidays and happiness, of love." Jonas blurted out what he was feeling. "I was thinking that, well, I can see it, that it wasn't a very practical way to live, with the old right there in the same place where maybe they wouldn't be well taken care of the way they are now, and that we have a better arranged way of doing things. But anyway, I was thinking, feeling actually, that it was kind of nice then. And I wish we could be that way and that you could be my grandparent. The family and the memories seemed a little more, he faltered, not able to find the word he wanted. A little more complete, the giver suggested. Jonas nodded. I liked the feeling of love, he confessed. He glanced nervously at the speaker on the wall, reassuring himself that no one was listening. I wish we still had that, he whispered. Of course, he added quickly, I do understand that it wouldn't work very well, and that it's much better to be organized the way we are now. I can see that it was a dangerous way to live. What do you mean? Jonas hesitated. He wasn't certain really what he meant. He could feel that there was risk involved, though he wasn't sure how. Well, he said finally, grasping for an explanation, they had a fire right there in that room. There was a fire burning in that fireplace, and there were candles on a table. I can certainly see why those things were outlawed. Still, he said slowly, almost to himself, I did like the light they made and the warmth. So in this section is like Jonas getting this memory is honestly so great because it really, obviously he's changed by the memory of war from the previous chapter, but he's also changed by this memory of love from the giver's favorite memory. And he gets a lot of good information about it. Obviously, we can tell from our world as the reader that he is experiencing a memory of Christmas. And so the whole family is together in the living room celebrating Christmas with the Christmas tree and the presents and the fire. And, it's wintertime. And so obviously this is a gift-giving holiday. And so him experiencing that, it wasn't just the fact of getting the gifts that was so strong in the room. It was the element of family, the fact that there was a celebration, everybody together and, feeling warmth and love and happiness, right? And it was all like everyone's together, everyone feels great, right? Everybody does usually during Christmas, right? When you have, especially if you have big families and you're, everyone's kind of, not toxic or anything like we think about now, right? But then Jonas thinks, obviously at the end of this section here, he thinks about how, it's not the best way to live. It's not very practical, right? Like it's nice. It's nice to have grandparents. It's nice to have big families and to feel loved and to have all of these people together. But he says it's not very practical. And he says it's dangerous, right? And he says this, but then he's like referring to the fire, the fire in the house, the fire on the candles. What if they could get knocked off or the fire could burn up the whole house and burn everybody, get everybody killed, right? Basically. But obviously we live in a world where we have those things, right? We have candles and fire and they're pretty well regulated. What Jonas, I think, wants to talk about, going back to the things he said before in previous chapters where like people having a choice of families, because there are a lot of people who experience the holidays and in a bad way, who don't have a family that is all together and feeling love and all this kind of stuff, right? So while there are all of these positive things, these positive memories, the way that people lived before, back, Jonas's community, it was dangerous. It was, people could get hurt. And so that's kind of, I think, what he's feeling right here. But he still's like kind of thinking, what seems to be more important or what even seems to be better, right? Is it safety, feeling safe and like knowing that, you won't be harmed and that you won't feel lonely or you won't be heartbroken? Or is it feeling love? Is it feeling the connection with others and having these happy memories? So he's starting to kind of like go back and forth between the memories were kind of nice, the world in the memories seems kind of nice, but also our community is practical. We are safe, it's not dangerous. So we'll see. Mother, father, Jonas asked tentatively after the evening meal. I have a question I want to ask you. What is it, Jonas? His father asked. He made himself say the words, though he felt flushed with embarrassment. He had rehearsed them in his mind all the way home from the annex. Do you love me? There was an awkward silence for a moment. Then father gave a little chuckle. Jonas, You of all people, precision of language, please. What do you mean? Jonas asked. Amusement was not at all what he had anticipated. Your father means that you used a very generalized word, so meaningless that it's become almost obsolete, his mother explained carefully. Jonas stared at them. Meaningless? He had never before felt anything as meaningful as the memory. And of course, our community can't function smoothly if people don't use precise language. You could ask, "Do you enjoy me?" The answer is yes, his mother said. Or, his father suggested, "Do you take pride in my accomplishments?" And the answer is wholeheartedly yes. Do you understand why it's inappropriate to use a word like love? Mother asked. Jonas nodded. Yes, thank you, I do, he replied slowly. It was the first lie to his parents. So this next section, he's sort of testing out the boundaries, similar to the way he tested out the boundaries with sharing the dreams with his friends and his family and how it didn't work. And once again, trying to get them to feel this feeling of love or understand what love is in a family. And his parents respond in a very bland way, right? Almost like it's silly, right? What you're asking. It's not real, like it's obsolete. It's so meaningless. And Jonas clearly disagrees, right? Like he can't possibly be meaningless because of the feeling that he had from the dream. And if he's listening to the giver to trust the memories, that trust is really strong. And it can't possibly be meaningless if it was such a strong feeling. And so when his parents are like, there are more appropriate ways to say that, like, do you care for, or do you enjoy me? Do you take pride in my accomplishments? And of course, right? But love is not an appropriate word for any of those feelings. And so Jonas is like, okay, yeah, I get it, but he's lying. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get why his parents can't experience love or say they love him, right? He's starting to question this. He's starting to think maybe this isn't the best way that the community could be operating. Gabriel, Jonas whispered that night to the new child. The crib was in his room again. After Gabe had slept soundly in Jonas's room for 4 nights, his parents had pronounced the experiment a success and Jonas a hero. Gabriel was growing rapidly, now crawling and giggling across the room and pulling himself up to stand. He could be upgraded to the nurturing center, Father said happily. Now that he slept, he could be officially named and given to his family in December, which was only 2 months away. So we almost hit a year, right? This is kind of an important timeline of events. So it has almost been a year since Jonas was selected as the receiver of memory, and he's gone through his training. It's now, November. Is it September? August? Okay, it's October, right? So it's October. I can't count clearly, or don't know my calendar. It's October. It's almost been a year since, it's been 10 months since he's started his training as the receiver. And, this is a big moment, right? Because now Gabriel is also aging up appropriately to start his ceremony of 1 and be given away to his family. And it seems like everything's okay, but there is a complication in here, right? Gabe is sleeping soundly in Jonas's room because Jonas gave Gabriel a memory. Gabriel was the only person that Jonas tried to give a memory, or he didn't intend to give the memory, but he tried to give the memory to Gabriel and it worked. It was the only person who it worked on. And that is why Gabriel has been sleeping soundly in Jonas's room. So if he goes back to the nurturing center and doesn't sleep soundly, that could be a problem. But when he was taking away, look at this. I should have just read the next line. But when he was taken away, he stopped sleeping again and cried in the night. He was always back in Jonas's sleeping room. They would give it a little more time, they decided, since Gabe seemed to like it in Jonas's room. He would sleep there at night a little longer until the habit of sound sleep was fully formed. The nurturers were very optimistic about Gabriel's future. There was no answer to Jonas's whisper. Gabriel was sound asleep. Things could change, Gabe, Jonas went on. Things could be different. I don't know how, but there must be some way for things to be different. There could be colors. And grandparents, he added, staring through the dimness toward the ceiling of his sleeping room. And everybody would have the memories. You know about the memories, he whispered, turning toward the crib. Gabriel's breathing was even and deep. Jonas liked having him there, though he felt guilty about the secret. Each night he gave memories to Gabriel, memories of boat rides and picnics in the sun, memories of soft rainfall against window panes, memories of dancing barefoot on a damp lawn. Gabe? The new child stirred slightly in his sleep. Jonas looked over at him. There could be love, Jonas whispered. The next morning, for the first time, Jonas did not take his pill. Something within him, something that had grown there through the memories, told him to throw the pill away. Okay, so if you remember the pills that Jonas starts taking, like it's right before his ceremony of 12, because he gets these things called stirrings. You know, he tells his parents about this strange dream, and he said, like, you know, his parents said, oh, this is the stirrings, so you need to start taking a pill and the stirrings will go away. And at first he's like really happy by this. He's like, okay, this is cool. Like, I can deal with this. This is chill, right? Like, no problem. You know, stirrings, who cares? But now that Jonas is kind of having these thoughts, right? He's thinking about grandparents. He's telling Gabe, right? Things could be different. And really, he's not telling Gabe anything because Gabe is a baby, right? He can't really understand him. He's sleeping. So Jonas is kind of talking to himself. He's using Gabe as like a person that he feels like he can talk to because he doesn't have anybody else to talk to, unfortunately. And he's saying, you know, there could be love, right? We could have a different community. We could experience these things and it be positive. And so he stops taking his pill because it's like this urge, this instinct in him to give it up and to throw them away. And we'll have to see if anybody figures this out, because yeah, Jonas is keeping secrets. This is not something that technically other members of the community are allowed to do. Only the giver and the receiver of memory are allowed to lie. And, you know, they have special rules. So we'll see. We'll see if this changes anything about what's going on. Chapter 17. Today is declared an unscheduled holiday. Yay! Jonas, his parents, and Lily all turned in surprise and looked at the wall speaker from which the announcement had come. It happened so rarely and was such a treat for the entire community when it did. Adults were exempted from the day's work, children from school and training and volunteer hours. The substitute laborers who would be given a different holiday took over all the necessary tasks, nurturing, food delivery, and the care of the old. And the community was free. Jonas cheered and put his homework folder down. He had been about to leave for school. School was less important to him now. And before much time passed, his formal schooling would end. But still, for 12s, though they had begun their adult training, there were endless lists of rules to be memorized and the newest technology to be mastered. He wished his parents, sister, and Gabe a happy day and rode down toward the bicycle path, looking for Asher. He had not taken the pills now for 4 weeks. The stirrings had returned, and he had felt a little guilty and embarrassed about the pleasurable dreams that came to him as he slept. But he knew he couldn't go back to the world of no feelings that he had lived in for so long. And his new heightened feelings permeated a greater realm than simply his sleep. Though he knew that his failure to take the pills accounted for some of it, he thought that the feelings came also from the memories. Now he could see all of the colors, and he could keep them too, so that the trees and grass and bushes stayed green in his vision. Gabriel's rosy cheeks stayed pink even while he slept, and apples were always, always red. Now, through the memories, he had seen oceans and mountain lakes and streams that gurgled through woods, and now he saw the familiar wide river beside the path differently. He saw all of the light and color and history it contained and carried in its slow-moving water. He knew that there was an elsewhere from which it had came, and an elsewhere to which it was going. On this unexpected casual holiday, he felt happy, as he always had on holidays, but with a deeper happiness than ever before. Thinking, as he always did, about precision of language, Jonas realized that it was a new depth of feeling that he was experiencing. Somehow, they were not all the same as the feelings that every evening in every dwelling, every citizen analyzed with endless talk. I felt angry because someone broke the play area rules Lily had said once, making a fist with her small hand to indicate her fury. Her family, Jonas among them, had talked about the possible reasons for rule breaking and the need for understanding and patience until Lily's fist had relaxed and her anger was gone. But Lily had not felt anger, Jonas realized now. Shallow impatience and exasperation. That was all Lily had felt. He knew that with certainty now because he knew what anger was. Now he had, in the memories, experienced injustice and cruelty, and he had reacted with rage that welled up so passionately inside him that he thought of discussing it calmly at the evening meal was unthinkable. I felt sad today, he heard his mother say, and they had comforted her. But now Jonas had experienced real sadness. He had never felt grief. He knew that there was no quick comfort for emotions like those. These were deeper, and they did not need to be told. They were felt. Today, he felt happiness. Asher, he spied his friend's bicycle leaning against a tree at the edge of the playing field. Nearby, other bikes were strewn about on the ground. On a holiday, the usual rules of order could be disregarded. He skidded to a stop and dropped his own bike beside the others. "Hey, Ash," he shouted, looking around. There seemed to be no one in the play area. "Where are you?" "Phew!" A child's voice coming from behind a nearby bush made the sound. "Pow, pow, pow!" A female 11 named Tanya staggered forward from where she had been hiding. Dramatically, she clutched her stomach and stumbled about in a zigzag pattern, groaning. "You got me," she called and fell to the ground, grinning. Blam! Jonas, standing on the side of the playing field, recognized Asher's voice. He saw his friend, aiming an imaginary weapon in his hand, dart from behind one tree to another. "Blam! You're in my line of ambush, Jonas. Watch out!" Jonas stepped back. He moved behind Asher's bike and knelt so that he was out of sight. It was a game he had often played with other children, a game of good guys and bad guys. A harmless pastime that used up their contained energy and ended only when they all lay posed in freakish postures on the ground. He had never recognized it before as a game of war. "Attack!" The shout came from behind the small storehouse where the play equipment was kept. 3 children dashed forward, their imaginary weapons in firing position. From the opposite side of the field came an opposing shout. "Counterattack!" From the hiding places, a horde of children, Jonas recognized Fiona in the group, emerged, running in a crouched position, firing across the field. Several of them stopped, grabbed their own shoulders and chest with exaggerated gestures, and pretended to be hit. They dropped to the ground and lay, suppressing giggles. Feelings surged within Jonas. He found himself walking forward into the field. "You're hit, Jonas!" Asher yelled from behind the tree. "Pow! You're hit again!" Jonas stood there in the center of the field. Several of the children raised their heads and looked at him uneasily. The attacking armies slowed, emerged from their crouched positions, and watched to see what he was doing. In his mind, Jonas saw again the face of the boy who had lain dying on a field and had begged him for water. He had sudden choking feeling, as if it were difficult to breathe. One of the children raised an imaginary rifle and made an attempt to destroy him with a firing noise. Pshoo! Then they were all silent, standing awkwardly. The only sound was the sound of Jonas's shuddering breaths. He was struggling not to cry. Gradually, when nothing happened, nothing changed, the children looked at each other nervously and went away. He heard the sounds as they righted their bicycles and began to ride down the path that led from the field. Only Asher and Fiona remained. "What's wrong, Jonas? It was only a game," Fiona said. "You ruined it," Asher said in an irritated voice. "Don't play it anymore," Jonas pleaded. "I'm the one who's training for assistant recreation director," Asher pointed out angrily. "Games aren't your area of expertise." "Expertise," Jonas corrected him automatically. "Whatever, you can't say what we play, even if you are going to be the new receiver." Asher looked warily at him. "I apologize for not paying you the respect you deserve," he mumbled. "Asher," Jonas said. He was trying to speak carefully, with kindness, to say exactly what he wanted to say. "You had no way of knowing this. I didn't know it myself until recently. But it's a cruel game. In the past, there have been... I said I apologize, Jonas." Jonas sighed. It was no use. Of course, Asher couldn't understand. I accept your apology, Asher, he said wearily. Do you want to go for a ride along the river, Jonas? Fiona asked, biting her lip with nervousness. Jonas looked at her. She was so lovely. For a fleeting instant, he thought he would like nothing better than to ride peacefully along the river path, laughing and talking with his gentle female friend. But he knew that such times had been taken from him now. He shook his head. After a moment, his two friends turned and went to their bikes. He watched as they rode away. Jonas trudged to the bench beside the storehouse and sat down, overwhelmed with feelings of loss. His childhood, his friendships, his carefree sense of security, all of these things seemed to be slipping away. With his new heightened feelings, he was overwhelmed by sadness at the way the others had laughed and shouted, playing at war. But he knew that they could not understand why without the memories. He felt such love for Asher and for Fiona, but they could not feel it back without the memories. And he could not give them those. Jonas knew with certainty that he could change nothing. Okay, so this first part of the chapter, this section, right, he gets a holiday and, he's just feeling great, right? He's having a really, really great time. He's feeling amazing. No school. I mean, who doesn't, right? Everybody feels happy when there's no school. I feel happy when there's no school. But yeah, everyone's excited because we get to just have a holiday. We get to play around and just chill out. I think it's really interesting first because I remember reading this several times and this line about the substitute laborers, because obviously the community has to continue to function somehow. People have to eat. People have to be able to be in their dwellings, and the babies still need care for and all this kind of stuff, right? The care of the old people still need care for, all that kind of stuff. So like the substitute laborers, I wonder where they come from and like what they do, right? Like I'm going to make a comment actually. My typing might be kind of bad, so excuse me. Where do the sub laborers come from? When do they get off? I have so many questions. Are they are they normal workers? Do they normally work? Because they have to have like a regular job. And like, it's just interesting. That's interesting. I've always wondered that. Always wondered that when I read this book about the substitute laborers. It's like, where do they come from? Who are they? Who are these people? And why are they considered the substitute laborers, And then he talks about elsewhere. He kind of has this like dream about like this, not like this dream, but like almost like a fantasy, like the water, it's flowing alongside the path and it's leading to other communities coming from other communities. And I think if you read the rest of the series, they do talk about there being a boat that travels from community to community using the river. They don't mention it in this book, but it is in the last book of the series because the last series comes back to this book. And so it is interesting because there is a boat, right? Additionally, I think what's interesting is that Jonas mentions that even on a holiday, right, they still have to learn about the technology, right? There's still endless lists of rules to be memorized and the newest technology to be mastered. So there is technology in this world, but like, what is the technology? Like, where does the technology come from? Like how technologically advanced are they? I mean, obviously we know they're technology advanced enough so that they have electricity, because Jonas makes comments about there being like candles for light and fire for light and warmth, right? So they have like their homes are heated. Or at least air conditioned, right? The weather is perfect, so they don't need to have heaters or air conditioners, I guess. But it is interesting. They do obviously have to have some kind of electronics in this world. In the GIVER movie trailer, they do show like it being more technologically advanced. And in the movie itself is really interesting how they set that up. But it's very different in the movie. The movie just makes a big show of it, almost like it's like supposed to be like a Hollywood blockbuster about a dystopian world or whatever. And so the technology is like super advanced in the movie. I don't know if it would be that much advanced though in the book. I've always wondered that. I've literally always wondered that. Another thing. Okay. And again, Jonas reflects on the fact that his feelings have grown deeper since he stopped taking the pills. And we're getting closer to December because it's been 4 weeks since he stopped taking the pills. He's feeling embarrassed and guilty, but these pleasurable dreams are coming back to him, and the depth of his feeling is bigger, right? Like he says it's one of the deeper happiness than ever before. And he even comments on the fact that like when other people have talked about their feelings, like you're supposed to talk about your feelings in the evening meal with your family units, it's not real. Those aren't real emotions, right? That they're talking about. When Lily feels anger, it's not real anger. It's frustration, it's impatience, but she's not really angry because Jonas knows what it's like to be really angry. And when his mom said, I feel sad today, right? Everybody comforted her. But Jonas is like, that's not real sadness because I know what real sadness is, right? I know what it feels to have injustice and cruelty and to be rageful and really depressed, right? Like he knows all of those feelings truly. And so like what he recognizes that what the people in the community are feeling are not that feeling. And then, of course, we get the scene where he sees the kids playing war, right? Shooting each other and pretending to die. And obviously, it's a joke. It's a game, right? It's not supposed to be real. It's just like playing video games, right? It's just like playing outside with your friends, right? It's like, any of that stuff. Like it's all fake. It's not supposed to be real. No one's supposed to be actually dying. And they're not necessarily making fun of war, right? They don't know what war is to even know that they're not being respectful to it or whatever. But Jonas recognizes that they are doing what they are doing and how hurtful it really is because he's seeing them like he saw the people dying in the memory of war. And it makes him really sad. And he's like struggling not to cry. And he's obviously trying to explain what's going on with his friends, right? Like, Fiona says it's just a game, and Asher gets kind of irritated. He's like, "You ruined it, right? Like, I'm supposed to be the one who's making up the games. Like, you don't get to say what we play and what we don't play." And Jonas is like, no, like you have to understand, like this is bad. Like this is a bad thing to do. This is a bad thing to mimic. And Jonas doesn't know exactly how to tell Asher. Asher makes this apology for not showing the respect he deserves to Jonas. But then when Jonas tries to explain, Asher's just like, I said I apologize. Like, what do you want? What more do you want? Right? Because Asher doesn't get it. And he probably never will, right? He's still taking the pills, just like every other adult above 12 in the community is, right? They're all taking the pills. So their feelings are surface level. They don't understand what it means to feel sad or depressed or even angry, right? Like it's very surface level. And Fiona tries to like diffuse the situation by let's going for a ride. And Jonas just he doesn't feel like it, right? He wants to let this all go and be behind and like live with ignorance to the world again, but he can't, right? He's left his whole childhood behind, right? He says all these things seem to be slipping away, and they are slipping away from him because he has changed. He's becoming an adult. He's realizing the way of the world. I would say it's very much a good story of like what it really means to become an adult and learning that when you're a child, you don't take things seriously. You're not supposed to because you're a kid, right? Like you're supposed to be having fun. You're supposed to be enjoying yourself. Like that's the whole point of being a kid is that you don't have to deal with the stressful stuff that adults deal with. But Jonas is now experiencing all of this stressful stuff, specifically the real stress of emotions and dealing with all of that. Okay. Back in their dwelling that evening, Lily chattered merrily about the wonderful holiday she had had playing with her friends, having her midday meal out of doors, and she confessed, sneaking a very short try on her father's bicycle. I can't wait till I get my very own bicycle next month. Father's is too big for me. I fell, she explained matter-of-factly. A good thing Gabe wasn't in the child seat. A very good thing, Mother agreed, frowning at the idea of it. Gabriel waved his arms at the mention of himself, and he began to walk just the week before. The first few steps of new child were always the occasion for celebration at the nurturing center. Father said, but also for the introduction of a discipline wand. Now, Father brought the slender instrument home with him each night in case Gabriel misbehaved. But he was happy, an easygoing toddler. Now he moved unsteadily across the room, laughing. Gay, he chirped. Gay. It was the way he said his own name. Jonas brightened. It had been a depressing day for him after such a bright start, but he set his glum thoughts aside. He thought about it, starting to teach Lily to ride so that she could speed off proudly after her ceremony of 9, which would be coming soon. It was hard to believe that it was almost December again. Almost a year had passed since he had become a 12. He smiled as he watched the new child plant one small foot carefully before the other, grinning with glee at his own steps as he tried them out. I want to get to sleep early tonight, Father said. Tomorrow's a busy day for me. The twins are being born tomorrow, and the test results show that they're identical. One for here, one for elsewhere, Lily chanted. One for here, one for else. Do you actually take it elsewhere, Father? Jonas asked. No, I have to make the selection. No, I just have to make the selection. I weigh them, hand the larger over to a nurturer who's standing by, waiting, and then I get a smaller one all cleaned up and comfy. Then I perform a small ceremony of release and he glanced down, grinning at Gabriel. Then I waved, bye-bye, and he said in a small, sweet voice he used when he spoke to the new child. He waved his hand in the familiar gesture. I'm just going to highlight this because we're going to come back to it. Gabriel giggled and waved bye-bye back to him. And somebody else comes in to get him? Somebody from elsewhere? That's right, Jonas Bonus. Jonas rolled his eyes in embarrassment that his father had used the silly pet name. Lily was deep in thought. What if they give the little twin a name elsewhere? A name like, maybe Jonathan? And here in our community, at his naming, the twin that we kept here is given this name Jonathan. And then there would be 2 children with the same name, and they would look exactly the same. And someday, maybe when they were a 6, one group of 6s would go to visit another community on a bus, and there in the other community, in the other group of 6s, would be a Jonathan who was exactly the same as the other Jonathan. And then maybe they would get mixed up and take the wrong Jonathan home, and maybe his parents wouldn't notice. And then she paused for a breath. Lily, Mother said, I have a wonderful idea. Maybe when you become a 12, they'll give you the assignment of storyteller. I don't think we've had a storyteller in the community for a long time, but if I were on the committee, I would definitely choose you for that job. Lily grinned. I have a better idea for one more story, she announced. What if it actually we're all twins and didn't know it, and so elsewhere there would be another Lily, and another Jonas, and another Father, and another Asher, and another Chief Elder, and another... Father groaned. Lily, he said, it's bedtime. Okay, so this is interesting, right? Because I know what's going to happen in the next chapter. If you've read this book, you know what's going to happen in the next chapter, because his father is talking about how the next day he is preparing to choose which twin gets to stay a part of the community and which they send for elsewhere, right? And Lily does this little chant of one for here, one for elsewhere, one for here, right? And she's very annoying in this entire chapter. But she brings up a very good viewpoint that I feel like maybe the children have in this community because they don't understand what release is. And, even reading this sometimes, I don't know if Jonas's father understands what release is. I feel like he does. And if you read that, when we read the next chapter, we'll talk about it then. But even just listening to him talk here, does Jonas's father know what release is? Because he says, do you actually have to take it elsewhere, right, Jonas? That's the question that Jonas asks. And he's like, no, I just have to make this election. I weigh them and I hand the one that weighs more to another nurturer, and I leave to take the one that weighs heavier to the nurturing room where they are going to keep him and raise him for the community. And then they take the smaller one and get him all cleaned up and comfy. And then I perform a small ceremony of release. And when he says this, perform a small ceremony of release, it's like the ceremony of release is like a word or like a code word, right? So if you know what release is, then ceremony of release is like the thing that happens, right? They're like, it's almost like a code. And then when he does this really creepy, and then I wave bye-bye, right? After he's done. In sort of like a cute way because he's a nurturer. He's supposed to be taking care of little babies. Like that's how he acts, right? And then Jonas asks follow-up questions, right? Like, and somebody else comes to get him, right? What happens after you perform a ceremony of release, right? He stops and I wave bye-bye, right? Like that's all he gets to know. Jonas wants to know like, well, where does the baby go? You know, like where does he go? Somebody else get him to take him elsewhere. And father tells him, yep, sure does. That's what happens, right? And so then this sets Lily up on this whole tangent about the twins being in different communities, right? Because that's what they really think happens when someone is released from the community. They think that the person gets sent to another community, right? Another place, elsewhere, right? Who knows where it is? Who knows what? And Lily has this whole kind of spiel about like, what if this twin is given the same name as his twin in our community and they go to visit each other's communities and they get switched up, right? And how crazy would that be? And obviously everyone thinks this is very cute and also very annoying. And her mom makes a little joke about being storyteller, right? And then, Lily goes off on this whole other tangent about what if we're actually all twins and we all have a doppelganger, a twin in another community somewhere and they're all named, the same thing as us. And it goes on for a while, right? Until she goes to bed. But this is really an interesting concept of the way that people look at release in the community, right? They don't look at it as anything else but, oh, they just get sent away. They just go somewhere where we never see them again, And that's it. That's the answer that they have. Even Jonas and Lily have all accepted that. It's interesting because Jonas doesn't really seem to accept it at first. Like he keeps asking questions. He wants to know specifically what goes on in the ceremony of release because it is a secret. Why wouldn't you want to know it? Right? Okay, so let's continue on and see what happens in chapter 18. Giver, Jonas asked the next afternoon, do you ever think about release? Do you mean my own release or just the general topic of release? Both, I guess. I apologize. I should have been more precise, but I don't know exactly what I meant. Sit back up. No need to lie down while we're talking. Jonas, who had already been stretched out on the bed when the questions came to his mind, sat back up. I guess I do think about it occasionally, the giver said. I think about my own release when I'm in awful pain, an awful lot of pain. I wish I could put in a request for it sometimes, but I'm not permitted to do that until the new receiver is trained. Me, Jonas said in a dejected voice. He was not looking forward to the end of the training when he would become the new receiver. It was clear to him that a terribly difficult and lonely life it was, despite the honor. I can't request for release either, Jonas pointed out. It was in my rules. The giver laughed harshly. I know that. They hammered out those rules after the failure 10 years ago. Jonas had heard again and again now reference to the previous failure, but he still did not know what had happened 10 years before. Giver, he said, tell me what happened, please. The giver shrugged. On the surface, it was quite simple. A receiver-to-be was selected the way you were. The selection went smoothly enough, the ceremony was held, and the selection was made. The crowd cheered, as they did for you. The new receiver was puzzled and a little frightened, as you were. My parents told me it was a female. The giver nodded. Jonas thought of his favorite female, Fiona, and shivered. He wouldn't want his gentle friend to suffer the way he had, taking on the memories. What was she like? He asked the giver. The giver looked sad, thinking about it. She was a remarkable young woman, very self-possessed and serene, intelligent, eager to learn. He shook his head and drew a deep breath. Jonas, when she came to me in this room, when she presented herself to begin her training, Jonas interrupted him with a question. Can you tell me her name? My parents said that it wasn't to be spoken again in the community, but couldn't you just say it just to me? The giver hesitated painfully, as if saying the name aloud might be excruciating. Her name was Rosemary, he told Jonas finally. Rosemary, I like that name. The giver went on. When she came to me for the first time, she sat there in the chair where you sat on your first day. She was eager and excited and a little scared. We talked. I tried to explain things as well as I could. The way you did to me, The giver chuckled ruefully. The explanations are difficult. The whole thing is so beyond one's experience. But I tried. And she listened carefully. Her eyes were very luminous, I remember. He looked up suddenly. Jonas, I gave you a memory that I told you was my favorite. I still have a shred of it. The room with the family and the grandparents. Jonas nodded. Of course he remembered. Yes, he said. It had that wonderful feeling with it. You told me it was love. You can understand, then, that that's what I felt for Rosemary. The giver explained. I loved her. I feel it for you, too, he added. What happened to her? Jonas asked. Her training began. She received well, as you do. She was so enthusiastic, so delighted to experience new things. I remember her laughter. His voice faltered and trailed off. What happened? Jonas asked again after a moment. Please tell me. The giver closed his eyes. It broke my heart, Jonas, to transfer pain to her, but it was my job. It was what I had to do, the way I had to do it to you. The room was silent. Jonas waited. Finally, the giver continued. 5 weeks. That was all. I gave her happy memories, a ride on a merry-go-round, a kitten to play with, a picnic. Sometimes I chose one just because I knew it would make her laugh, and so I treasured the sound of that laughter in this room that had always been so silent. But she was like you, Jonas. She wanted to experience everything. She knew that it was her responsibility, and so she asked me for more difficult memories. Jonas held his breath for a moment. You didn't give her war, did you? Not after just 5 weeks. The giver shook his head and sighed. No, I didn't give her physical pain, but I gave her loneliness, and I gave her loss. I transferred a memory of a child taken from its parents. That was the first one. She appeared stunned at its end. Jonas swallowed. Rosemary and her laughter had begun to seem so real to him, and he pictured her looking up from the bed of the memories, shocked. The giver continued. I backed off. I gave her more little delights, but everything changed. Once she knew about pain, I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't brave enough, Jonas suggested. The giver didn't respond to the question. She insisted that I continue, that I not spare her. She said it was her duty, and I knew, of course, that she was correct. I couldn't bring myself to inflict physical pain on her, but I gave her anguish of many kinds. Poverty and hunger and terror. I had to, Jonas. It was my job, and she had been chosen. The giver looked at him imploringly. Jonas stroked his hand. Finally, one afternoon, we finished for the day. It had been a hard session. I tried to finish, as I do with you, by transferring something happy and cheerful, but the times of laughter were gone by then. She stood up very silently, frowning as if she were making a decision. Then she came over to me and put her arms around me. She kissed my cheek. As Jonas watched, the giver stroked his own cheek, recalling the touch of Rosemary's lips 10 years before. She left here that day, left this room, and did not go back to her dwelling. I was notified by the speaker that she had gone directly to the chief elder and asked to be released. But that's against the rules. The receiver in training can't apply for It's in your rules, Jonas. But it wasn't in hers. She asked for release and they had to give it to her. I never saw her again. So that was the failure, Jonas thought. It was obvious that it had saddened the giver deeply. But it didn't seem such a terrible thing after all. And he, Jonas, would never have done it, never have requested for release, no matter how difficult his training became. The giver needed a successor, and he had been chosen. A thought occurred to Jonas. Rosemary had been released very early in her training. What if something happened to him, Jonas? He had a whole year's worth of memories now. Giver, he asked, I can't request released, I know that. But if something happened, an accident, what if I fell into the river, like the little four Caleb did? Well, that didn't make sense because I'm a good swimmer, but what if I couldn't swim and fell into the river and was lost? Then there wouldn't be a new receiver, but you would already have given away an awful lot of important memories. So even though they would select a new receiver, the memories would be gone except for the shreds that you have left of them. And then what if, he started to laugh suddenly. I sound like my sister Lily, he said, amused at himself. The giver looked at him gravely. You just stay away from the river, my friend, he said. The community lost Rosemary after 5 weeks, and it was a disaster to them. I don't know what the community would do if they lost you. Why was it a disaster? I think I mentioned it to you once, the giver reminded him, that when she was gone, the memories came back to the people. If you were to be lost in the river, Jonas, your memories would not be lost with you. Memories are forever. Rosemary had only 5 weeks worth, and most of them were good ones. But there were those few terrible memories, the ones that had overwhelmed her. For a while, they overwhelmed the community. All of those feelings, they'd never experienced that before. I was so devastated by my own grief at her loss and my own feeling of failure that I didn't even try to help them through that. I was angry, too. The giver was quiet for a moment, obviously thinking, he said finally, if they lost you with all the training you've had now, they'd have all those memories again themselves. Jonas made a face. They'd hate that. They certainly would. They wouldn't know how to deal with it at all. The only way I deal with it is by having you here to help me, Jonas pointed out with a sigh. The giver nodded. I suppose, he said slowly, that I could. You could what? The giver was still deep in thought. After a moment, he said, if you floated off the river, I suppose I could help the whole community the way I've helped you. It's an interesting concept. I need to think about it some more. Maybe we'll talk about it again sometime, but not now. I'm glad you're a good swimmer, Jonas, but stay away from the river. He laughed a little, but the laughter was not lighthearted. His thoughts seemed to be elsewhere, and his eyes were very troubled. Okay, so I kind of lied that the next chapter is not where you figure out releases, but we do, I'm pretty sure, I'm going to just come back here to the portal real quick to make sure. I'm pretty sure, yes, that the next chapter is where we find out about release. The next chapter is where we find out about release. Okay, so chapter 19, not chapter 18. Okay, let's come back to the book. Okay, so again, Jonas asking questions, wanting to know what happened. Why was there a failure? And he sort of gets it. There's just one key element missing that Jonas is not fully understanding, and that is release, right? Because he hears that Rosemary, he hears her name, and it's, again, this is another clue, as if saying the name aloud might be excruciating. The giver trying to say her name and being in pain, just saying it out loud. Rosemary failed and asked to be released, right? She got memories. She got good memories, but then she got horrible memories. And because the giver didn't want to give her physical pain, he gave her, emotional pain, psychological pain, spiritual pain to a certain extent, right? Loneliness, a memory of a child being taken from its parents. That's huge, right? Especially to think that in their community, children are taken from their birth mothers literally every day, right? The birth mothers give birth. The birth mothers don't get to see the child. They're just taken away and given out into the rest of the community, or raised by the community, essentially. And again, this is something that's going to come up later in the series. If you do continue the Giver Quartet, the final book does come back to this idea of a child being taken away from its birth mother, which is interesting. And again, this memory leads Rosemary to ask for release, to request release. And to the giver, this is extremely painful. And again, so Jonas is like, okay, well, so she asked to be released, and this is sad in the giver because he misses her, obviously. But it didn't seem such a terrible thing, right? To Jonas, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. Release is not something serious to him. The game of war is serious to him because he knows what it means. He does not know what release is. He doesn't know what it means. And so that is the key element here in why Jonas is not quite understanding why this is such a failure, why it's so excruciating for the giver to be repeating it or to be talking about it. And they kind of go back. They have a little hypothetical conversation about what if something happened to Jonas? Would the giver be able to help the community through assimilating all of those memories and kind of taking in all of those memories? All right, so let's continue on to chapter 19. Jonas glanced at the clock. There was so much work to be done, always, that he and the giver seldom simply sat and talked the way they just had. I'm sorry that I wasted so much time with my questions, Jonas said. I was only asking about release because my father is releasing a new child today, a twin. He has to select one and release the other one. They do it by weight. Jonas glanced at the clock. Actually, I suppose he's already finished. I think it was this morning. The giver's face took on a solemn look. I wish they wouldn't do that, he said quietly, almost to himself. Well, they can't have two identical people around. Think how confusing that would be, Jonas chuckled. I wish I could watch, he added, as an afterthought. He liked the thought of seeing his father perform the ceremony and making the little twin clean and comfy. His father was such a gentle man. You can watch, the giver said. No, Jonas told him. They never let the children watch. It's very private. Jonas, the giver told him, I know that you read your training instructions very carefully. Don't you remember that you are allowed to ask anyone anything? Jonas nodded, yes, but Jonas, when you and I have finished our time together, you will be the new receiver. You can read the books. You'll have the memories. You'll have access to everything. It's part of your training. If you want to watch a release, you simply have to ask. Jonas shrugged. Well, maybe I will then. But it's too late for this one. I'm sure it was this morning. The giver told him then, something he had not known. All private ceremonies are recorded. They're in the hall of closed records. Do you want to see this morning's release? Jonas hesitated. He was afraid that his father wouldn't like it if he watched something so private. I think you should, the giver told him firmly. All right then, Jonas said. Tell me how. The giver rose from his chair, went to the speaker on the wall, and clicked the switch from off to on. The voice spoke immediately. Yes, receiver, how may I help you? I would like to see this morning's release of the twin. One moment, receiver. Thank you for your instructions. Jonas watched the video screen above the row of switches. Its blank face began to flicker with zigzag lines. Then some numbers appeared, followed by a date and time. He was astonished and delighted that this was available to him, and surprised he had not known. Suddenly, he could see a small windowless room, empty except for a bed, a table with some equipment on it. Jonas recognized a scale. He had seen them before, when he had been doing volunteer hours at the nurturing center, and a cupboard. He could see pale carpeting on the floor. It's just an ordinary room, he commented. I thought maybe they'd have it in the auditorium so that everybody could come. All the old go to the ceremonies of release, but I suppose that when it's just a newborn, they don't. Shh, the giver said, his eyes on the screen. Jonas's father, wearing his nurturing uniform, entered the room, cradling a tiny new child wrapped in a soft blanket in his arms. A uniformed woman followed through the door, carrying a second new child wrapped in a similar blanket. That's my father, Jonas found himself whispering as if he might wake the little ones if he spoke too loud. And the other nurturer is his assistant. She's still in training, but she'll be finished soon. The two nurturers unwrapped the blankets and laid the identical newborns on the bed. They were naked. Jonas could see that they were males. He watched, fascinated, as his father gently lifted one and then the other to the scale and weighed them. He heard his father laugh. Good, his father said to the woman. I thought for a moment that they both might be exactly the same. Then we'd have a problem. But this one, he handed one after rewrapping it to his assistant, is 6 pounds even. So you can clean him up and dress him and take him over to the center. The woman took the new child and left through the door she had entered. Jonas watched as his father bent over the squirming new child on the bed. And you, little guy, you're only 5 pounds 10 ounces. A shrimp. That's the special voice he uses with Gabriel, Jonas remarked, smiling. Watch, the giver said. Now he cleans him up and makes him comfy, Jonas told him. He told me. Be quiet, Jonas, the giver commanded in a strange voice. Watch. Obediently, Jonas concentrated on the screen, waiting for what would happen next. He was especially curious about the ceremony part. His father turned and opened the cupboard. He took out a syringe and a small bottle. Very carefully, he inserted the needle into the bottle and began to fill the syringe with a clear liquid. Jonas winced sympathetically. He had forgotten that new children had to get shots. He hated shots himself, though he knew that they were necessary. To his surprise, his father began very carefully to direct the needle to the top of the new child's forehead, puncturing the place where the fragile skin pulsed. The newborn squirmed and wailed faintly. Why is he? Shh, the giver said sharply. His father was talking, and Jonas realized that he was hearing the answer to this question he had started to ask. Still, in the special voice, his father was saying, I know, it hurts, little guy, but I have to use a vein, and the veins in your arms are still too teeny weeny. He pulled the plunger very slowly, injecting the liquid into the scalp vein until the syringe was empty. All done. That wasn't too so bad, was it? Heard his father say cheerfully. He turned aside and dropped the syringe into a waste receptacle. Now he cleans him up and makes him comfy, Jonas said to himself, aware that the giver didn't want to talk during the little ceremony. As he continued to watch, the new child, no longer crying, moved his arms and legs in a jerking motion. Then he went limp. His head fell to one side, his eyes half open. He was still. With an odd, shocked feeling, Jonas recognized the gestures and posture and expression. They were familiar. He had seen them before, but he couldn't remember where. Jonas stared at the screen, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The twin lay motionless. His father was putting things away, folding the blanket, closing the cupboard. Once again, he had on the playing field. He felt the choking sensation. Once again, he saw the face of the light-haired, bloodied soldier as life left his eyes. The memory came back. He killed it. My father killed it, Jonas said to himself, stunned at what he was realizing. He continued to stare at the screen numbly. His father tidied the room. Then he picked up a small carton that lay waiting on the floor, set it on the bed, and lifted the limp body into it and placed the lid on tightly. He picked up the carton and carried it to the other side of the room. He opened a small door in the wall. Jonas could see darkness behind the door. It seemed to be the same sort of chute into which trash was deposited at school. His father loaded the carton containing the body into the chute and gave it a shove. "Bye-bye, little guy," Jonas heard his father say before he left the room. Then the screen went blank. The giver turned to him quite calmly. He related, "When the speaker notified me that Rosemary had applied for release, they turned on the tape to show me the process. There she was, my last glimpse of that beautiful child, waiting. They brought in the syringe and asked her to roll up her sleeve. You suggested, Jonas, that perhaps she wasn't brave enough. I don't know about bravery, what it is, what it means. I do know that I sat there numb with horror, wretched with helplessness, and I listened as Rosemary told them that she would prefer to inject herself. Then she did so. I didn't watch. I looked away." The giver turned to him. "Well, there you are, Jonas. You were wondering about release," he said in a bitter voice. Jonas felt a ripping sensation inside himself, the feeling of terrible pain clawing its way forward to emerge in a cry. And now he knows what release is. Welcome back, Dagon, the Alpha Kaiju. We just read chapter 19, which is the chapter in which Jonas learns what release is. Finally, he finally figures it out. And this totally makes sense. Like the previous chapter, the giver is like kind of talking to him about Rosemary's release in this very like painful way. And Jonas is like, what is it? That's not big of a deal. Release, what is that? That doesn't even matter. That's not that big of a deal. Like they just go to elsewhere. They just go to another community. And it's so interesting in this chapter because the giver, I think, has picked up on the fact that Jonas doesn't know what release is. The way he's acting, the way he's responding to him telling the story of Rosemary, the giver's like, he doesn't actually suggest it because it's Jonas that suggests it, right? Jonas is the one who's like, well, I was asking about this because, my father has to do it for this, has to have a release ceremony for this twin. And the giver's like mad, right? The giver's like, well, I wish they wouldn't do that, And Jonas is kind of like, well, that doesn't, why? Of course they have to, right? They have to. Can't have identical people in the community. That's crazy. That's crazy, right? We can't do that. And then he kind of has this afterthought, oh, I wish I could watch it. Like he's so fascinated by this idea of the ceremony of release. He really wishes that he could see what it is. And the giver, once the Jonas says this, right? The giver almost pushes him to be like, you want to see it, right? Like, let's watch it. Let's watch the release. Because we can, right? Jonas, he's like, you're the receiver now. You can watch this. Let's watch it. Let's watch it. I joined with something about a wave. Oh yeah, no, yeah, we're getting to that chapter because we're getting to the part, Dagon, where Jonas finally watches the tape of his father releasing the new twin, right? And that's when you came right in after that, right? Right after I said that his father killed it. I read this part. He killed it. My father killed it, right? Um, so yeah, so he's watching this recording of the release, and he's like, "Oh, there's my dad. He's going to be doing this," and he doesn't suspect anything. The only thing that makes this like kind of bells go off for Jonas is when the giver's like, "Watch, just watch, don't talk, just watch it," right? And Jonas is like, "Wonder what's going on with the giver? Like, why is that so weird?" Right? And then he starts to get a little like, "Wait a minute, why is he injecting the baby's forehead?" Like, whoa, that doesn't seem like a normal shot, right? Because he knows about shots. He says like shots are familiar to him. He knows how shots are. You have to get shots, but nobody's ever gotten a shot in their forehead before, and not that he's aware of, right? So he's like, "Oh, that's interesting. That's different than what I'm used to." And then he's like waiting for his father to do the ceremony, and he doesn't even realize that the ceremony has already happened. That the injection is the release. The injection is the ceremony. And it's like slowly dawns on him, seeing this kid go lifeless is exactly like seeing the soldier go lifeless in his memory, right? So, no worries, no worries, Dagon. We're just kind of reviewing the chapter. And that's when Jonas finally realizes, right? My father just killed this child. And this is where I want to go back to the previous chapter where his dad, I think it was chapter 17, his dad talks about like what he does to release a new child, right? And Gabriel asks him, and somebody else comes to get him, somebody from elsewhere. And his father said, "Yep, that's right. Somebody does that." But that's not what happens. That's not what happens in the recording, right? In the recording, his father injects the child, cleans up the room, doesn't actually clean up the child, cleans up the room, and then puts the body in a trash dispenser, a trash chute. He straight up lied to Jonas. And maybe when you become a nurturer or you become a caretaker of the old, you learn what release is and you're instructed not to tell anybody. That's what I think. I don't, because it doesn't actually like specifically say that in the book, but it does seem like you are allowed to lie when it comes to topics on release, because you can't tell anybody what it is. You are allowed to lie about release and what it is. That's what makes me think that that's in their rules, because why else would his father lie to him about what actually happens during the ceremony? Because he does lie to him, right? I get him all cleaned and comfy. I perform a small ceremony of release, and then I wave bye-bye, and that's what he does, right? But when, Jonah's saying, "Oh, does somebody else come to get him?" He's like, "Oh, yeah. No, nobody else comes to get him. His father is the only one left in the room, and he's the one who shoves the body of the child down the chute, right?" And so, like, Jonas finally realizing this, right? And the giver kind of fills him in on some more tidbits about Rosemary. When Rosemary applied for release, she was like, she wanted to inject herself, right? So I wonder if Rosemary found out what release was, and if maybe that was the reason why she wanted to be released. And that's why she injected herself. Like almost like, I know what's going to happen. I'm just going to do it anyway. Which is kind of weird, kind of crazy. It makes it even the more tragic, I guess, for the giver to have to watch her be the one to commit the ceremony of release and inject herself and basically kill herself. Yeah, that's got to be hard, right? And then he says that he couldn't watch it. He had to look away. He couldn't watch her inject herself, which is even more sad. And of course, Jonas is like completely stunned by this. He's just completely like blown away by the fact that, oh my God, release is death. Release is killing people. Release is death. There's no elsewhere. There's no place where you go. You die when you get released. He finally figures it out. Yeah. Crazy stuff. Okay. That was chapter 19. We're getting close to the end of the book. We have 3 chapters left into chapter 20. And now that Jonas knows this information and he's feeling all of these really deep feelings, remember, he's not taking the pills, so he's even more like emotional than normal. So let's see what happens now that he knows what release is and has found out that his father has been lying to him and is feeling this. This is real pain, right? This is not even like it's not a memory of pain. This is a real pain that he's feeling. Yeah. Okay, chapter 20. Yeah, newsflash. I think it's obvious from the reader's perspective what release is. I think it's easy to tell when you're reading the book, like that release is death. But, obviously from a like dramatic irony perspective, Jonas doesn't know. And so we're reading it from Jonas's perspective. We can kind of still suspend our disbelief to think, okay, well, maybe it's not death. Maybe it is something else. Maybe they are okay, right? But they're not. Chapter 20. I won't go home. You can't make me, Jonas sobbed and shouted and pounded the bed with his fists. Sit up, Jonas, the giver told him firmly. Jonas obeyed him. Weeping, shuddering, he sat on the edge of the bed. He would not look at the giver. You may stay here tonight. I want to talk to you. But you must be quiet now while I notify your family unit. No one must hear you cry. Jonas looked up wildly. No one heard that little twin cry either. No one but my father. He collapsed into sobs again. The giver waited silently. Finally, Jonas was able to quiet himself, and he sat huddled, his shoulders shaking. The giver went to the wall speaker and clicked the switch to on. Yes, receiver, how may I help you? Notify the new receiver's family unit that he will be staying with me tonight for additional training. I will take care of that, sir. Thank you for your instructions, the voice said. I will take care of that, sir. I will take care of that, sir, Jonik mimicked in a cruel, sarcastic voice. I will do whatever you like, sir. I will kill people, sir. Old people, small newborn people. I'd be happy to kill them, sir. Thank you for your instructions, sir. How many help you? He couldn't seem to stop. The giver grasped his shoulders firmly. Jonas fell silent and stared at him. Listen to me, Jonas. They can't help it. They know nothing. You said that to me once before. I said it because it's true. It's the way they live. It's the life that was created for them. It's the same life that you would have if you had not been chosen as my successor. But he lied to me, Jonas wept. It's what he was told to do. He knows nothing else. What about you? Do you lie to me too? Jonas almost spat the question at the giver. I am empowered to lie, but I have never lied to you. Jonas stared at him. Release is always like that? For people who break the rules 3 times? For the old? Do they kill the old too? It's like finding out that Santa isn't real, except in a really worse way. Because I feel like this is... Okay, I just have to take a moment to have a little bit of like... a little bit of a memory like blip in here. But from me personally, I feel like this is how I kind of acted when I found out that Santa wasn't real. And if you're 12 years old and you're watching this and you think that Santa's still real, he's still real. I'm lying. This is fake. I'm lying. Santa is still real. What are you talking about? This is just a fake story, hypothetical. But I remember when my parents told me that Santa wasn't real, and I cried and I was really upset. And I came out of my room from crying, and I came to them and was like, does this mean that the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy aren't real either? And then, of course, everything was revealed that, of course, But yeah, Santa's still real. Don't listen to me. Santa is still real. Okay, but that's what happened to me. It's the same kind of glass breaking revelation. What release is. And he asks him, oh my God, is this what release has always been like? Release has always been that way for all the people that ever got released. And unfortunately, Jonas, the answer is yes. Yes, it's true. And what about Fiona? She loves the old. She's in training to care for them. Does she know yet that she will do what she will do when she finds out how she'll feel? Jonas brushed wetness from his face with back of one hand. Fiona is already being trained in the fine art of release, the giver told him. She's very efficient at her work, your red-haired friend. Feelings are not a part of the life she's learned. Jonas wrapped his arms around himself and rocked his own body back and forth. What should I do? I can't go back. I can't. The giver stood up. First, I will order our evening meal. Then we will eat. Jonas found himself using the nasty, sarcastic voice again. Then we'll have a sharing of feelings? The giver gave a rueful, anguished, empty laugh. Jonas, you and I are the only ones who have feelings. We've been sharing them now for almost a year. I'm sorry, Giver, Jonas said miserably. I don't mean to be so hateful. Not to you. The Giver rubbed Jonas's hunched shoulders. After we eat, he went on, we'll make a plan. Jonas looked up, puzzled. A plan for what? There's nothing we can do. It's always been this way, before me, before you, before the ones who came before you. Back and back and back. His voice trailed the familiar phrase. Jonas, the Giver said after a moment, it's true that it has been this way for what seems forever. But the memories tell us that it has not always been. People felt things once. You and I have been a part of that, so we know. We know that they once felt things like pride and sorrow and love, Jonas added, remembering the family scene that had so affected him. And pain, he thought again of the soldier. The worst part of holding the memories is not the pain. It's the loneliness of it. Memories need to be shared. I've started to share them with you, Jonas said, trying to cheer him. That's true, and having you here with me over the past year has made me realize that things must change. For years, I felt that they should, but it seems so hopeless. Now, for the first time, I think there might be a way, the Giver said slowly, and you brought it to my attention barely. He glanced at the clock 2 hours ago. Jonas watched him and listened. Okay, so before we get into this next section, right, Jonas is reacting to finding out what release really is, and the Giver's trying to be like, okay, so now that you know, like, you have to understand, right, like, they don't know anything. The people who are doing this, your father, Fiona, who's a member of a house of, like, who's a caretaker of the old, none of them know that this is what it is. Like, they don't know, like, the real things behind it, right? You can't blame them. They don't have the memories to understand the importance of this. And, Jonas has being really resentful here, right? He's mocking the speaker. He's mocking even the sharing of feelings, right? When the Giver says, oh, we should get our evening meal. And Jonas is like, oh, should we have our sharing of feelings, right? And the Giver's like, listen, we're the only two that have feelings. Like, don't give me that nonsense, right? We're the only ones who are real here. And I love that this happens, because I think it's like the first time that happens in the book. Because after Jonas is kind of being a brat about it and being really resentful, he's kind of mean to the Giver. He says, I'm sorry, Giver. But it is not the standard apology, the I apologize, blah, 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 right? This is an actual apology. This is a real apology, because he knows, like, that he has been mean and hateful, and he's directing it at the Giver, but he doesn't mean to direct it at the Giver. And so this is a real apology, right? This is a real I'm sorry, because Jonas feels bad in many ways. But I love this. I love this moment. I wish it were more prominent in the book almost, but it's there. We pointed it out. So there you go. And then the Giver starts to get this idea, right? Like, let's make a plan. And Jonas is like, what plan can we make? Like, there's nothing that can happen. And the Giver's like, but I've been thinking, we need to share the memories with people. Like, we need to make this, we need to share the memories. Like, it can't keep going on like this. It's just not right. Right. So the Giver's going to make a plan with Jonas, and let's see what happens. Things are going to change. It was late at night now. They had talked and talked. Jonas sat wrapped in a robe belonging to the Giver, the long robe that only elders wore. It was possible, what they had planned, very barely possible. If it failed, he would very likely be killed. But what did it matter? If he stayed, his life was no longer worth living. Yes, he told the Giver, I'll do it. I think I can do it. I'll try anyway. But I want you to come with me. The Giver shook his head. Jonas, he said, the community has depended all these generations back and back and back on a resident receiver to hold their memories for them. I've turned over many of them to you in the past year, and I can't take them back. There's no way for me to get them back if I had given them. So if you escape once you are gone, and Jonas, you know that you can never return. Jonas nodded solemnly. It was a terrifying part. Yes, he said, I know. But if you come with me, the Giver shook his head and made a gesture to silence him. He continued, if you get away, if you get beyond, if you get to elsewhere, it will mean the community has to bear the burden themselves of the memory you had been holding for them. I think that they can and that they will acquire some wisdom, but it will be desperately hard for them. When we lost Rosemary 10 years ago and her memories returned to the people, they panicked. All those were such few memories, and those were such few memories compared to yours. When your memories return, they'll need help. Remember how I helped you in the beginning when the receiving of memories was new to you? Jonas nodded. It was scary at first, and it hurt a lot. You need me then, and now they will. It's no use. They'll find someone to take my place. They'll choose a new receiver. There's no one ready for training, not right away. Oh, they'll speed up the selection, of course, but I can't think of another child who has the right qualities. There's a little female with pale eyes, but she's only a 6. That's correct. I know the one you mean. Her name is Catherine, but she's too young, so they will be forced to bear those memories. But I want you to come, Giver, Jonas pleaded. No, I have to stay here, the Giver said firmly. I want to, Jonas. If I go with you and together we take all their protection from the memories, Jonas, the community will be left with no one to help them. They'll be thrown into chaos. They'll destroy themselves. I can't go. Giver, Jonas suggested, you and I don't need to care about the rest of them. The Giver looked at him with a questioning smile. Jonas hung his head. Of course they needed to care. It was the meaning of everything. And in any case, Jonas, the Giver sighed, I wouldn't make it. I'm very weakened now. Do you know that I no longer see colors? Jonas's heart broke. He reached for the Giver's hand. You have the colors, the Giver told him, and you have the courage. I will help you to have the strength. A year ago, Jonas reminded him, when I had just become a 12, when I began to see the first color, you told me that the beginning had been different for you, but that I wouldn't understand. The Giver brightened. That's true. And do you know, Jonas, that with all your knowledge now, with all your memories, with all you've learned, still you won't understand? Because I've been a little selfish. I haven't given any of it to you. I wanted to keep it for myself to the last. Keep what? When I was just a boy, younger than you, it began to come to me. But it wasn't the seeing beyond for me. It was different. For me, it was hearing beyond. Jonas frowned, trying to figure that out. What did you hear? He asked. Music, the Giver said, smiling. I began to hear something truly remarkable, and it's called music. I'll give you some before I go. Jonas shook his head emphatically. No, Giver, he said. I want you to keep that to have with you when I'm gone. Okay, so obviously they make a plan for Jonas to escape. And when he escapes, when he leaves the border of the community, the memories will go back to the people in the community, and they'll have to deal with them. And so the Giver is saying, like, I've got to stay to help them deal with it, because really, he's right. He's the only way that they're going to survive it, right? If he can help talk them through it, help them understand what they mean and how to feel, then they'll be okay, right? Even though Jonas is like scared and doesn't want to go alone, right? He wants someone to come with him. But he accepts that the Giver wants to stay and wants to help the community, right? And then we learn about how there's more than just seeing beyond, right? There is hearing beyond, which the Giver says is music. He hears music, and that's how it started for him. And that's really interesting, because I feel like it is something a little bit that the other books do pick up on. Even in the second book, Gathering Blue, while it's not an exact extenuation of this book, it does still talk about the special ability that people have, like seeing beyond, hearing beyond, feeling beyond, having some kind of magical ability that is special and unique. And it's interesting, right? Because it's only a little tidbit, and I don't feel like it's fully explained in the rest of the series, although I wish it was. It's still a fascinating series. I still love the series, but like that is one of the things that they don't fully explain, is like these special abilities that people have. Even in like the third book, there's like these crazy special abilities, and it almost seems like Jonas's ability changes as he gets older when you read the later books, because it's not the exact same thing as like seeing colors and seeing beyond. It's a little bit different than that. But you'll have to read the rest of the series to find out what that is. Okay. Jonas went home the next morning, cheerfully greeted his parents, and lied easily about what a busy, pleasant night he had had. His father smiled and lied easily too about his busy and pleasant day the day before. Throughout the school day, as he did his lessons, Jonas went over the plan in his head. It seemed startlingly simple. Jonas and the Giver had gone over it and over it late into the night hours. For the next 2 weeks, as the time for the December ceremony approached, the Giver would transfer every memory of courage and strength he could to Jonas. He would need those to help him find elsewhere that they were both sure existed. They knew it would be a very difficult journey. Then, in the middle of the night before the ceremony, Jonas would secretly leave his dwelling. This was probably the most dangerous part because it was a violation of a major rule for any citizen not on official business to leave a dwelling at night. I'll leave at midnight, Jonas said. The food collectors will be finished picking up the evening meal remains by then, and the path maintenance crew don't start their work that early. So there won't be anyone to see me unless, of course, someone is out on emergency business. I don't know what you should do if you are seen, Jonas, the giver had said. I have memories, of course, of all kinds of escapes, people fleeing from terrible things throughout history, but every situation is individual. There is no memory of one like this. I'll be careful, Jonas said. No one will see me. As a receiver in training, you're held in very high respect already, so I think you wouldn't be questioned very forcefully. I'd just say I was on some important errand for the receiver. I'd say it was all your fault that I was out after hours, Jonas teased. They both laughed a little nervously, but Jonas was certain that he could slip away unseen from his house, carrying an extra set of clothing. Silently, he would take his bicycle to the riverbank and leave it there hidden in bushes, with the clothing folded beside it. Then he would make his way through the darkness on foot silently to the annex. There's no nighttime attendant, the giver explained. I'll leave the door unlocked. You simply slip into the room. I'll be waiting for you. His parents would discover when they woke that he was gone. They would also find a cheerful note from Jonas on his bed telling them that he was going for an early morning ride along the river, that he would be back for the ceremony. His parents would be irritated, but not alarmed. They would think him inconsiderate, and they would plan to chastise him later. They would wait with mounting anger for him. Finally, they would be forced to go, taking Lily to the ceremony without him. They won't say anything to anyone, though, Jonas said, quite certain. They won't call attention to my rudeness because it will reflect on their parenting. And anyway, everyone is so involved in the ceremony that they probably won't notice that I'm not there. Now that I'm a 12 and in training, I don't have to sit with my age group anymore, so Asher will think I'm with my parents or with you, and your parents will assume you're with Asher or me. Jonas shrugged. It will take everyone a while to realize that I'm not there at all. And you and I will be long on our way by then. In the early morning, the giver would order a vehicle and driver from the speaker. He visited the other communities frequently, meeting with their elders. His responsibilities extended all over the surrounding areas, so this would not be an unusual undertaking. Ordinarily, the giver did not attend the December ceremony. Last year, he had been present because of the occasion of Jonas's selection, in which he was so involved. But his life was usually quite separate from that of the community. No one would comment on his absence or on the fact that he had chosen this day to be away. When the driver and vehicle arrived, the giver would send the driver on some brief errand. During his absence, the giver would help Jonas hide in the storage area of the vehicle. He would have with him a bundle of food, which the giver would save from his own meals during the next 2 weeks. The ceremony would begin with all the community there, and by then, Jonas and the giver would be on their way. So did the giver decide to go with him then, this time? By midday, Jonas's absence would become apparent and would be cause for serious concern. The ceremony would not be disrupted. Such a disruption would be unthinkable, but searchers would be sent out into the community. By the time his bicycle and clothing were found, the giver would be returning. Jonas, by then, would be on his own, making his journey elsewhere. The giver, on his return, would find the community in a state of confusion and panic, confronted by a situation which they had never faced before. And having no memories from which to find either solace or wisdom, they would not know what to do and would seek his advice. He would go to the auditorium where the people would be gathered still. He would stride to the stage and command their attention. He would make the solemn announcement that Jonas had been lost in the river. He would immediately begin the ceremony of loss. Jonas, Jonas, they would say loudly, as they had once said the name of Caleb. The giver would lead the chant. Together, they would let Jonas's presence in their lives fade away as they had said his name in unison, more slowly, softer and softer, until he was disappearing from them, until he was no more than an occasional murmur, and then, by the end of the long day, gone forever, not to be mentioned again. Their attention would turn to the overwhelming task of bearing the memories themselves. The giver would help them. Yes, I understand that they'll need you, Jonas had said at the end of the lengthy discussion and planning, but I'll need you too. Please come with me. He knew the answer, even as he made the final plea. My work will be finished, the giver had replied gently, when I have helped the community to change and become whole. I am grateful to you, Jonas, because without you, I would never have figured out a way to bring about the change. But your role now is to escape, and my role is to stay. But don't you want to be with me, Giver? Jonas asked sadly. Aw. The Giver hugged him. I love you, Jonas, he said, but I have another place to go. When my work here is finished, I want to be with my daughter. Jonas had been staring glumly at the floor. Now he looked up, startled. I didn't know you had a daughter, Giver. You told me you had a spouse, but I never knew about your daughter. The Giver smiled and nodded. For the first time in their long months together, Jonas saw him look truly happy. Her name was Rosemary, the Giver said. Aww. So now we know why the Giver has such painful memories of Rosemary, because not only was she the receiver in training who failed, but she was also his daughter. And so he feels even more sad and heartbroken over her loss. And to anyone who was thinking it was weird that he said he loved her in the previous chapter, just goes to show that it was because he was her dad. That's why he loved her. Hi, Sadiq. Plasma Bolt 305. How are you? I'm good. We're just finishing The Giver. Have you read this book? It's a really, really good book. And we're getting close to the end, actually. So so Jonas has decided he's gonna leave, right? He's leaving the community. He's like, I'm out of here. And he wants the Giver to come with him. Obviously, the Giver can't. And they kind of go through what the plan is in this chapter, what's supposed to happen, right? He's gonna leave like late at night, around midnight, so no one will catch him. And while he'll give them some excuse of why he's missing, he'll give his parents some excuse. They'll be at the ceremony. They won't know anything. They won't think anything strange. And the Giver will be leaving too. So they won't, again, like there's all these covers that they should have, so that Jonas won't be caught and that he can leave the community and go elsewhere and try to survive and let the memories that he has go back to the community. And the Giver will come and try to help them through dealing with it. And so Jonas, it's like, okay, we can do this. Easy. We got this. But he wants the Giver to come. Obviously, he won't. But then the Giver says something interesting that Jonas was not expecting. He's like, after I'm finished helping the community, I'm going to go be with my daughter, who is Rosemary, obviously. And Rosemary, she's dead. So that means that the Giver plans to end his life as well. I don't think he means it in necessarily like a bad way. He means it as in like, my job will be done. I'm an old person and I will move on from my life, kind of in that respect. But yeah, really interesting that Rosemary was the Giver's daughter this whole time. And it just gives more context to the whole point, to the whole thing that happened between them. All right, 21, 22, 23, 3 more chapters. Chapter 21, it would work. They could make it work, Jonas told himself again and again throughout the day. But that evening, everything changed. Is it gonna? Oh, come on. There we go. It was so delayed. We're gonna try that again. But that evening, everything changed. All of it, all the things they had thought through so meticulously fell apart. That night, Jonas was forced to flee. He left the dwelling shortly after the sky became dark and the community still. It was terribly dangerous because some of the work crews were still about, but he moved stealthily and silently, staying in the shadows, making his way past the darkened dwellings and the empty central plaza toward the river. Beyond the plaza, he could see the house of the old with the annex behind it, outlined against the night sky. But he could not stop there. There was no time. Every minute counted now, and every minute must take him farther and farther from the community. Okay, so something happened, right? That Jonas has to leave immediately. He can't stop at the annex and do the whole plan of getting the driver and hiding in the back seat and all this kind of stuff. He has to leave the community right away. And so he's going to get on his bike and he's going to head out of there and try to just book it, and get on his own trail to leave the community. He's not going to stay. But he's going out right at night. He's at night. He's leaving the community like they had planned, but something else is off. Now he was on the bridge, hunched over on the bicycle, pedaling steadily. He could see the dark, churning water far below. He felt surprisingly no fear nor any regret at leaving the community behind, but he felt a very deep sadness that he had felt his closest friend behind. He left his closest friend behind. He knew that in the danger of his escape, he must be absolutely silent, but with his heart and mind, he called back and hoped that with his capacity for hearing beyond, the giver would know that Jonas had said goodbye. Yeah, so at first you're thinking he had left his closest friend behind. Oh no, Asher? No, he had left the giver behind. That was his closest friend. So so now we're going to hear what happened, why Jonas had to leave so quickly, instead of following the plan that he and the giver had come up with. It happened at the evening meal. The family unit was eating together as always, Lily chattering away, mother and father making their customary comments and lies, Jonas knew, about the day. Nearby, Gabriel played happily on the floor, babbling his baby talk, looking with glee now and then toward Jonas, obviously delighted to have him back after the unexpected night away from the dwelling. Father glanced down toward the toddler. "Enjoy it, little guy," he said. "This is your last night as a visitor." "What do you mean?" Jonas asked him. Father sighed with disappointment. "Well, he wasn't here when you got home this morning because we had him stay overnight at the nurturing center. Seemed like a good opportunity with you gone to give it a try. He had been sleeping so soundly." "Didn't it go well?" Mother asked sympathetically. Father gave a rueful laugh. "That's an understatement. It was a disaster. He cried all night, apparently. The night crew couldn't handle it. They were really frazzled by the time I got to work." "Gabe, you naughty thing," Lily said with a scolding little cluck toward the grinning toddler on the floor. "So," Father went on, "we obviously had to make the decision. Even I voted for Gabriel's release when he had the meeting this afternoon." Jonas put his fork down and stared at his father. "Release?" he asked. Father nodded. "We certainly gave it our best try, didn't we?" "Yes, we did," Mother agreed emphatically. Lily nodded in agreement too. Jonas worked at keeping his voice absolutely calm. When? When will he be released?" "First thing tomorrow morning. We have to start our preparations for the naming ceremony, so we thought we'd get this taken care of right away." "It's bye-bye to you, Gabe, in the morning," Father had said in his sweet sing-song voice. Oh. So Gabriel is going to be scheduled to be released. And so his father is like, "Well, we got to take care of Gabe before the naming ceremony." And so Jonas is like probably freaking out on the inside, right? He's trying to keep his voice calm when he's talking to his dad about when's this supposed to happen. And so clearly Jonas is like, "I don't want Gabe to get released," right? That's what he's thinking. So perhaps he's taken Gabe with him and left the community in order to save baby Gabriel from being killed because he knows what release is now. So he's leaving the community early, breaking the plan, all of the plan, and taking Gabe with him on his escape. Jonas reached the opposite side of the river, stopped briefly, and looked back. The community where his entire life had been lived lay behind him now, sleeping. At dawn, the orderly, disciplined life he had always known would continue again without him. The life where nothing was ever unexpected or inconvenient or unusual. The life without color, pain, or past. He pushed firmly again at the pedal with his foot and continued riding along the road. It was not safe to spend time looking back. He thought of the rules he had broken so far, even enough that if he were caught now, he would be condemned. First, he had left the dwelling at night, a major transgression. Second, so the rules he has broken. Second, he had robbed the community of food, a very serious crime, even though what he had taken was leftovers, sat out on the dwelling's doorstep for collection. Third, he had stolen his father's bicycle. He had hesitated for a moment standing beside the bike port in the darkness, not wanting anything of his father's and uncertain as well whether he could comfortably ride the larger bike when he was so accustomed to his own. But it was necessary because it had the child seat attached to the back, and he had taken Gabriel too. He could feel the little head nudge his back, bouncing gently against him as he rode. Gabriel was sleeping soundly, strapped into the seat. Before he had left the dwelling, he had laid his hands firmly on Gabe's back and transmitted to him the most soothing memory he could, a slow swinging hammock under a palm trees on an island someplace at evening, with a rhythmic sound of languid water lapping hypnotically against a beach nearby. As the memory seeped from him into the new child, he could feel Gabe's sleep ease and deepen. There had been no stir at all when Jonas lifted him from the crib and placed him gently into the molded seat. He knew that he had the remaining hours of night before they would be aware of his escape, so he rode hard, steadily, willing himself not to tire as the minutes and miles passed. There had been no time to receive the memories he and the giver had counted on of strength and courage. Uh-oh, that's not good. So he relied on what he had and hoped it would be enough. He circled the outlying communities, their dwellings dark. Gradually, the distances between communities widened, with longer stretches of empty road. His legs ached at first, then, as time passed, they became numb. At dawn, Gabriel began to stir. They were in an isolated place, fields on either side of the road. I'm just going to highlight this part real quick because this is just telling us a little bit about the world, right? They were in an isolated place. Fields on either side of the road were dotted with thickets of trees here and there. He saw a stream and made its way across the rutted, bumpy meadow. Gabriel, wide awake now, giggled as the bicycle jolted him up and down. Jonas unstrapped Gabe, lifted him from the bike, and watched him investigate the grass and twigs with delight. Carefully, he hid the bicycle in the thicket bushes. Morning meal, Gabe. He unwrapped some of the food and fed them both. Then he filled the cup he had brought with water from the stream and held it for Gabriel to drink. He drank thirstily himself and sat by the stream watching the new child play. He was exhausted. He knew he must sleep, resting his own muscles and preparing himself for more hours on the bicycle. It would not be safe to travel in daylight. They would be looking for him soon. And we know they have technology too, so they're definitely going to be looking for him using planes and technology, maybe infrared sensors. He found a place deeply hidden in the trees. I'm backing up here. He found a place deeply hidden in the trees, took the new child there and lay down, holding Gabriel in his arms. Gabe struggled cheerfully as if it were a wrestling game, the kind they had played back in the dwelling with tickles and laughter. Sorry, Gabe, Jonas told him. I know it's morning, and I know you just woke up, but we have to sleep now. Hey, Macho Man. He cuddled the small body close to him and rubbed the little back. He murmured to Gabriel soothingly, then pressed his hands firmly and transmitted the memory of deep, contented exhaustion. Gabriel's head nodded after a moment and fell against Jonas's chest. Together, the fugitives slept through the first dangerous day. Okay, so yeah, no worries, Macho Man. You are a little late, but we're not that far yet to the end. Jonas has just left his community. Okay, we're okay. I thought it was me. Jonas has just left his community with Gabriel and broken several rules, but he did it because Jonas knew that Gabriel was going to be released. The nurturers had voted to release Gabriel, even his father, and so he couldn't let that happen. So he stole Gabriel, he stole his father's bicycle, and he left the community in the middle of the night to try and escape, which was the original plan, but he had to make some new changes. He didn't say goodbye to the giver on his way out, which was kind of sad for him. And so he's dealing with leaving the community and trying to escape with Gabe and knowing that they're going to be coming after him. They're going to be trying to search for him. The most terrifying thing was the planes, right? Okay, so like I said, right, the planes are a technology that the community uses, and they're going to be using these planes to try to find Jonas and Gabe. By now, days had passed. Jonas no longer knew how many. The journey had become automatic, the sleep by days hidden in underbrush and trees, the finding of water, the careful division of scraps of food, augmented by what he could find in the fields, and the endless miles on the bicycle by night. His leg muscles were taut now. They ached when he settled himself to sleep, but they were stronger, and he stopped now less often to rest. Sometimes he paused and lifted Gabriel down for a brief bit of exercise, running down the road or through a field together in the dark. But always when he returned, strapped the uncomplaining toddler into the seat again and remounted, his legs were ready. So he had enough strength of his own, and he had not needed what the giver might have provided had there been time. But when the planes came, he wished that he could have received the courage. He knew they were search planes. They flew so low that they woke him with the noise of their engines, and sometimes looking out and up fearfully from the hiding places, he could almost see the faces of the searchers. He knew that they could not see color, and that their flesh, as well as Gabriel's light golden curls, would be no more than smears of gray against the colorless foliage. But he remembered from his science and technology studies at school that the search planes used heat-seeking devices, which could identify body warmth and could hone in on two humans huddled in the shrubbery. So always, when he heard the aircraft sound, he reached to Gabriel and transmitted memories of snow, keeping some for himself. Together, they became cold. And when the planes were gone, they would shiver, holding each other until sleep came again. Sometimes, urging the memories into Gabriel, Jonas felt that they were more shallow, a little weaker than they had been. It was what he had hoped, what he and the giver had planned, that as he moved away from the community, he would shed the memories and leave them behind for the people. But now when he needed them, when the planes came, he tried hard to cling to what he still had of cold and to use it for their survival. Usually the aircraft came by day when they were hiding, but he was alert at night too. On the road, always listening intently for the sound of engines. Even Gabriel listened and would call out, "Plane, plane," sometimes before Jonas heard the terrifying noise. When the aircraft searchers came, as they did occasionally during the night as they rode, Jonas sped to the nearest tree or bush, dropped to the ground, and made himself and Gabriel cold. But it was sometimes a frighteningly close call. As he pedaled through the nights, through isolated landscape now, with the communities far behind and no sign of human habitation around him or ahead, he was constantly vigilant, looking for the next nearest hiding place next nearest hiding place should the sound of engines come. But the frequency of the planes diminished. They came less often and flew, when they did come, less slowly, as if the search had become haphazard and no longer hopeful. Finally, there was an entire day and night when they did not come at all. Hi, 8th grade Sam. Welcome. We're closing in on the end of The Giver. Yes, just saying hi. Well, thank you. Thank you for stopping by and just saying hi. So Gabe has left the community. He's on his trek out, right? He's sleeping at night. No, sleeping during the day and riding at night so he won't be seen as easily. But there are planes. There are search planes coming after him, and he is aware, knowledgeable of the heat-seeking devices, right? The infrared cameras that the planes have. And so he uses his memories of snow to keep him and Gabriel cold so that they won't be picked up by the infrared cameras or the heat-seeking cameras or whatever. And he notices now that the memories are starting to leave him, right? The memories are not as clear as they once were when he first started. And he knows that this is because he's left the community and the community is now receiving the memories back. And so, but it's also problematic for him because he needs them to for the survival of him and Gabriel, right? But now he's getting to a point where there are no more planes. The planes are not flying over as frequently. He's gotten far enough where he's not in the area or the radius in which they're searching. He even says that as if the search had become haphazard, no longer hopeful. So maybe the giver has kind of come up with a way to help the people in the community to not be so like, we got to find Jonas, and have started to take in the memories and maybe started to understand them more with the help of the giver, hopefully. But yeah, let's see. We got 2 more chapters to go. Chapter 22, second to last chapter. Let's see what happens to Jonas and Gabe. Obviously, we can't see what's happening back at the community because this is from Jonas's perspective. But if you read the rest of the series, maybe you'll get a little hint as to what happened to the people in the community. Now, chapter 22. Now, the landscape was changing. It was a subtle change, hard to identify at first. The road was narrower and bumpy and apparently no longer tended by road crews. It was harder suddenly to balance on the bike as the front wheel wobbled over stones and ruts. One night Jonas fell when the bike jolted to a sudden stop against a rock. He grabbed instinctively for Gabriel, and the new child, strapped tightly in his seat, was uninjured, only frightened when the bike fell to its side. But Jonas's ankle was twisted, and his knees were scraped and raw, blood seeping through his torn trousers. Painfully, he righted himself and the bike and reassured Gabe. What, Sam? You've never actually read this book? It's such a good book. Okay, well, if you're listening to the stream now, then you might get spoiled for the ending. But, if you don't mind. If you watch the movie, it's not as good personally. Just a heads up, the movie is not as good. And we'll watch the trailer when we're finished with the book. Okay, tentatively, he began to ride in daylight. He had forgotten the fear of the searchers, who seemed to have diminished into the past. But now there were new fears. The unfamiliar landscape held hidden and unknown perils. Trees became more numerous, and the forests beside the road were dark and thick with mystery. They saw streams more frequently now and stopped often to drink. Jonas carefully washed his injured knees, wincing as he rubbed the raw flesh. The constant ache of his swollen ankle was eased when he soaked it occasionally in the cold water that rushed through the roadside gullies. He was newly aware that Gabriel's safety depended entirely upon his own continued strength. They saw their first waterfall for the first time in wildlife. "Plane, plane," Gabriel called, and Jonas turned swiftly into the trees, though he had not seen planes in days, and he did not hear an aircraft engine now. When he stopped the bicycle in the shrubbery and turned to grab Gabe, he saw the small, chubby arm pointing toward the sky. Terrified, he looked up, but it was not a plane at all. Though he had never seen one before, he identified it from his fading memories, for the giver had given them to him often. It was a bird. Soon there were many birds along the way, soaring overhead, calling. They saw deer too, and once beside the road, looking at them curious and afraid, a small reddish-brown creature with a thick tail, whose name Jonas did not know. He slowed the bike, and they stared at one another until the creature turned away and disappeared into the woods. Thank you for stopping in, Sam. Enjoy your nap. Have a good day. Have a good Saturday. Okay, just pausing here, since this is a good place to pause. Yeah, Jonas sees for the first time in real life a bird, which he's never seen before in real life. He's only seen it as a part of memories. And then he sees deer. He sees more animals, which again, he's never experienced before because there are no animals in his community. But there are animals. I'm sorry, I saw a little feather in the way of the camera. There are animals in the world that Jonas lives in, but they are kept out of the communities, probably for safety reasons. But that maybe their food does come from those animals, but nobody knows about those animals. The concept of animals are foreign to the people in the community for the most part. So him seeing them for the first time is like amazing, right? And at first he's like worried that Gabriel's calling out to a plane, but it's not a plane. It's a bird. Looks like a plane. All of it was new to him. After a life of sameness and predictability, he was awed by the surprises that lay beyond each curve of the road. He slowed the bike again and again to look with wonder at wildflowers, to enjoy the throaty warble of a new bird nearby, or merely to watch the way wind shifted the leaves in the trees. During his 12 years in the community, he had never felt such simple moments of exquisite happiness. But there were desperate fears building in him now as well. The most relentless of his new fears was that they would starve. Now that they had left the cultivated fields behind them, it was almost impossible to find food. They finished the meager store of potatoes and carrots they had saved from the last agricultural area, and now they were always hungry. Jonas knelt by a stream and tried without success to catch a fish. With his hands, frustrated, he threw rocks into the water, knowing even as he did so that it was useless. Finally, in desperation, he fashioned a makeshift net, looping the strands of Gabriel's blanket around a curved stick. After countless tries, the net yielded 2 flopping silvery fish. Methodically, Jonas hacked them to pieces with a sharp rock and fed the raw shreds to himself and to Gabriel. They ate some berries and tried without success to catch a bird. It's good that he's trying, though. I mean, wow, he knows that he can eat the bird. That's interesting, too, right? He knows he can eat the bird and obviously the fish, because the fish hatchery is a job in the community. But it's interesting. I wonder if any of the people know in the community that they can eat birds. This is something to think about. Okay, at night, while Gabriel slept beside him, Jonas lay awake, tortured by hunger, and remembered his life in the community where meals were delivered to each dwelling every day. He tried to use the flagging power of his memory to recreate meals and managed brief, tantalizing fragments, banquets with huge roast meats, birthday parties with thick frosted cakes, and lush fruits picked and eaten, sun-warmed and dripping from trees. But when the memory glimpses subsided, he was left with the gnawing, painful emptiness. Jonas remembered suddenly and grimly the time in his childhood when he had been chastised for misusing a word. The word had been starving. You have never been starving, he had been told. You will never be starving. Now he was. If he stayed in the community, he would not be. It was as simple as that. Once he had yearned for choice, then, when he had a choice, he had made the wrong one, the choice to leave, and now he was starving. But if he had stayed, his thought continued, if he had stayed, he would have starved in other ways. He would have lived a life hungry for feelings, for color, for love. And Gabriel? For Gabriel, there would have been no life at all, so there had not really been a choice. It became a struggle to ride the bicycle as Jonas weakened from the lack of food and realized at the same time that he was encountering something he had for a long time yearned to see: hills. His sprained ankle throbbed as he forced the pedal downward in an effort that was almost beyond him. The weather was changing, which is again something new to him, right? Never happened to him before. It rained for 2 days. Jonas had never seen rain, though he had experienced it often in the memories. He had liked those rains, enjoyed the new feeling of it, but this was different. He and Gabriel became cold and wet, and it was hard to get dry even with the sunshine occasionally followed. Gabriel had not cried during the long, frightening journey. Now he did. He cried because he was hungry and cold and terribly weak. Jonas cried too for the same reasons, and another reason as well. He wept because he was afraid now that he could not save Gabriel. He no longer cared about himself. Okay, this chapter is really where, Jonas starts to realize why the community was so good, right? Why the community would be considered a utopia, because the people in the community are completely cared for. Everything that they do, they can eat food, they can be rested, they can know their job. Like, they have no choice, but they also don't have to worry. They don't have the fear of dying of starvation or thirst or being injured like Jonas is now when he falls off the bike, right? Of worrying that your bike is going to be stumbled on a rock, right? So all of these things he's starting to realize were things that the community protected him and Gabriel from. Hi, Miss Golden. Welcome. We are getting close to the end of The Giver. We're on the last chapter. And we're at the part where Gabriel is trying to survive in the wilderness. And it's hard, and he's wishing that he went back to the community or that he stayed at the community. But that's when he realizes that obviously he has like a payoff almost, right? Like, you can stay in the community and be taken care of and fed and have a house and have a life. And then he's like, but if I had stayed, I wouldn't have had feelings or love or color. Like, all of those things would be taken from me. And for Gabriel, he wouldn't have a life at all because he was set to be released. So Jonas is like, we have to keep going. But he's worried that he's gonna lose Gabriel in the process, right? He's worried that he's not gonna be able to save Gabriel because they're running out of food. He has nowhere to go. It's raining. They're cold and wet. They could get sick from this weather, from riding in this weather. And Jonas is like, doesn't know what to do. He's like, where are we gonna go? Where are we gonna find shelter and food and survive? Let's find out in the last chapter of The Giver, chapter 23. I'm pretty sure this is the last chapter of The Giver. Yes, okay. Oh, wait, there's more? Okay, wait. Before we get to the last chapter, let me just come back here real quick. We'll come back to this room real quick. What is this? Is this an epilogue? No, okay, it's an afterword. Okay, we don't have to read the afterword. Yeah, this is the last chapter of The Giver. We're in the last chapter now. Chapter 23. Jonas felt more and more certain that the destination lay ahead of him. Very near now, in the night that was approaching, none of his senses confirmed it. He saw nothing ahead except the endless ribbon of road unfolding in twisting narrow curves. He heard no sound ahead. Yet he felt it. What is the ever after? I think it's the afterword. It's not, I don't think it's a full story, an extra chapter of what happens to Jonas. I wish it was, but it looks like it's just an afterword. We'll come to it and we'll check it out. We'll see. Yet he felt that elsewhere was not far away. But he had little hope left that he would be able to reach it. His hope diminished further when the sharp, cold air began to blur and thicken with swirling white. Gabriel, wrapped in his inadequate blanket, was hunched, shivering, and silent in his little seat. Jonas stopped the bike wearily, lifted the child down, and realized with heartbreak how cold and weak Gabe had become. Oh. Standing in the freezing mound that was thickening around his numb feet, Jonas opened his own tunic, held Gabriel to his bare chest, and tied the torn and dirty blanket around them both. Gabriel moved feebly against him and whimpered briefly into the silence that surrounded them. Dimly, from a nearly forgotten perception as blurred as the substance itself, Jonas recalled what the whiteness was. "It's called snow, Gabe," Jonas whispered. "Snowflakes. They fall down from the sky, and they're very beautiful." There was no response from the child who had once been so curious and alert. Jonas looked down through the dusk at the little head against his chest. Gabriel's curly hair was matted and filthy, and there were tear stains outlined in dirt on his pale cheeks. His eyes were closed. As Jonas watched, a snowflake drifted down and was caught briefly for a moment's sparkle in the tiny, fluttering eyelashes. Wearily, he remounted the bicycle. A steep hill loomed ahead. In the best of conditions, the hill would have been difficult, demanding ride, but now the rapidly deepening snow obscured the narrow road, and made the ride impossible. His front wheel moved forward imperceptibly as he pushed on the pedals with his numb, exhausted legs, but the bicycle stopped. It would not move. He got off and let it drop sideways into the snow. For a moment, he thought how easy it would be to drop beside it himself, to let himself and Gabriel slide into the softness of the snow, the darkness of night, the warm comfort of sleep. But he had come this far. He must try to go on. The memories had fallen behind him now, escaping from his protection to return to the people of his community. Were there any left at all? Could he hold on to a last bit of warmth? Did he still have the strength to give? Could Gabriel still receive? He pressed his hands into Gabriel's back and tried to remember sunshine. For a moment, it seemed that nothing came to him, that his power was completely gone. Then it flickered suddenly, and he felt tiny tongues of heat begin to creep across into his frozen feet and legs. He felt his face begin to glow with the tense, cold skin of his arms and hands relax. For a fleeting second, he felt that he wanted to keep it for himself, to let himself bathe in sunlight, unburdened by anything or anyone else. But the moment passed, and was followed by an urge, a need, a passionate yearning to share the warmth with the one person left for him to love. Aching from the effort, he forced the memory of warmth into the thin, shivering body in his arms. Gabriel stood. For a moment, they both were bathed in warmth and renewed strength as they stood hugging each other in the blinding snow. Jonas began to walk up the hill. The memory was agonizingly brief. He had trudged no more than a few yards through the night when it was gone and they were cold again. But his mind was alert now. Warming himself ever so briefly had shaken away the lethargy and resignation and restored his will to survive. He began to walk faster on feet that he could no longer feel. But the hill was treacherously steep. He was impeded by the snow and his own lack of strength. He didn't make it very far before he stumbled and fell forward. On his knees, unable to rise, Jonas tried a second time. His consciousness grasped at a wisp of another warm memory and tried desperately to hold it there, to enlarge it, and to pass it into Gabriel. His spirits and strength lifted with the momentary warmth, and he stood again. Gabriel stirred against him as he began to climb. But the memory faded, leaving him colder than before. If only he had had time to receive more warmth from the giver before he escaped. Maybe there would be more left for him now. But there was no purpose in if-onlys. His entire concentration now had to be on moving his feet, warming Gabriel and himself, and going forward. He climbed, stopped, and warmed them both briefly again with this tiny scrap of memory that seemed certainly to be all he had left. The top of the hill seemed so far away, and he did not know what lay beyond. But there was nothing left to do but continue. He trudged upwards. As he approached the summit of the hill at last, something began to happen. He was not warmer. If anything, he felt more numb and more cold. He was not less exhausted. On the contrary, his steps were leaden, and he could barely move his freezing, tired legs. But he began suddenly to feel happy. He began to recall happy times. He remembered his parents and his sister. He remembered his friends, Asher and Fiona. He remembered the giver. Memories of joy flooded through him suddenly. He reached the place where the hill crested, and he could feel the ground under his snow-covered feet become level. It would not be uphill anymore. "We're almost there, Gabriel," he whispered, feeling quite certain without knowing why. I remember this place, Gabe, and it was true. But it was not a grasping of thin and burdensome recollection. It was different. This was something that he could keep. It was a memory of his own. He hugged Gabriel and rubbed him briskly, warming him to keep him alive. The wind was bitterly cold. The snow swirled, blurring his vision. But somewhere ahead, through the blinding storm, he knew there was warmth and light. Using his final strength and a special knowledge that was deep inside him, Jonas found the sled that was waiting for them at the top of the hill. Numbly, his hands fumbled for the rope. Okay, is he imagining this? Is this a dream? Why is there a sled? Where did the sled come from? Like, was the memory real? Was the memory from the giver, like, did it happen? How is there, I don't understand. Where did the sled come from? He settled himself on the sled and hugged Gabe close. The hill was steep, but the snow was powdery and soft, and he knew that this time there would be no ice, no fall, no pain. Also, how does Jonas know this? Is this a part of his special seeing beyond power? Is he able to like see through things and like intuitively know what's out there? Inside his freezing body, his heart surged with hope. They started down. Jonas felt himself losing consciousness, and with his whole being, willed himself to stay upright atop the sled, clutching Gabriel, keeping him safe. The runners sliced through the snow, and the wind whipped at his face as they sped in a straight line through an incision that seemed to lead to the final destination. The place that he had always felt was waiting, the elsewhere that had held their future and their past. He forced his eyes open as they went downward, sliding, and all at once he could see lights, and he recognized them now. He knew they were shining through the windows of rooms, that they were red, blue, and yellow lights that twinkled from trees in places where families created and kept memories, where they celebrated love. Downward, faster and faster, suddenly he was aware with certainty and joy that below, ahead, they were waiting for him, and that they were waiting too for the baby. And for the first time, he heard something that he knew to be music. He heard people singing. Behind him, across vast distances of space and time, from the place he had left, he thought he heard music too. But perhaps it was only an echo. The end. That's it. That's the end of the book. It's over. Did he make it? What happened? I don't know. You'll have to read the rest of the series to find out. But I think that they did make it. Either that or he's dreaming. Or it's just a hallucination. It's like a near-death hallucination that he's having. I don't know. You decide what's happening. But honestly, it could be anything. He could have made it. Maybe they were celebrating Christmas. It is December. That would make sense. Maybe there's just people in this new place where they're celebrating Christmas. And maybe that's it. But yeah, we can applause. It's a good book. It's a really good book. It's a really good book. But that's the end. The afterword is Ever After is, I think, written by Lois Lowry from her perspective, talking about how she came up with the book. It's really long. Oh my God, it's really long. She talks about all of her inspiration, and so there's some pictures of her house and stuff in here. I'm not planning on reading this. No, I'm not planning on reading this. But this is interesting, right? Okay, this is the end of the book. We've made it. The Giver. Maybe he's helping the people back at the community. Jonas is these people this place elsewhere is real, and they found him and they took him and Gabe in. It's almost like, it seems like it's almost kind of biblical in a sense, because right at the end it talks about how like all these people are like celebrating love and they're like waiting for him, they're waiting for the baby, almost like they know he's coming. But how would they know? How would they know he's coming? Did the Giver send word ahead? What is going on? Totally an ambiguous ending. And if you didn't read the rest of the series, honestly, you could be fine. But I do think that the rest of the series does give us some context, and it does tell you what happens to Jonas and Gabriel. So like, if you're interested in knowing what happens after the Giver, you should definitely read the next book in the series, which is Gathering Blue. Oh, there's also Lois Lowry's speech in here too. That's cool. Let me get to the end, very end of this book. Oh, and then, okay, yeah. So it does have the first chapter of Gathering Blue in here as well. So yeah, so I'd recommend reading Gathering Blue. If you really want to know what happened to Jonas and Gabriel, you're going to have to read Gathering Blue. Then the third book is Messenger, which is where you really find out what happened to them. And then Sun is the last one, which does, you have to read that too. If you read the first 3 books, you have to read the last one. You have to finish it because it's just how it works, how it is. But yeah, thank you so much for sitting here and enjoying listening, enjoying listening to me read The Giver, the end of The Giver. It's good. It's a great series, and I highly recommend all the series, all 4 books in the series. So now that we're done, we're going to travel back to our normal world out of the book. We're going to do one last thing. So if you're still here with me, we are going to watch and finish the Giver movie trailer. And you all can decide if you think it looks cool or if you totally hate it. Personally, I've watched the whole movie, and one of my 3 of my favorite actors are in this movie. Meryl Streep and Jeff Bridges. And I think Taylor Swift is in this too, but I can't remember what she is in The Giver. I can't remember what her role is. I don't think she has like a big role because she's not Fiona. But I'm actually look at the cast real quick. Oh, I know who she is. I don't want to say anything though now. I know who she is. If you look up the cast, you'll know who Taylor Swift plays in the movie, but I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to ruin it. So yeah, I know who Taylor Swift plays. You'll have to watch it to check it out. Okay, so let's watch the trailer. This looks like actually a better trailer. No, wait, no. This is the same one, I think. Yeah, this is the same one. So we'll watch this one. Let me find my right thing. Here we go. All right, this is the Giver movie official trailer number 2. I think it's the more popular, honestly. From 2014. The movie came out almost 10 years ago. I don't particularly care for the movie, but it has some really great actors in it. And I think that the way that they produced it was actually not bad. I just thought that the way they changed the plot was kind of bad. So let's enjoy watching. Hi, Pineapple VR. We're going to watch the movie trailer to The Giver. Okay, it's going to go.
From great suffering came a solution. Communities.
Injected.
Serene, beautiful places.
Okay, the other thing I'm going to pause it. We're going to talk about it real quick. So I just have to, because we've technically watched a part of this already in the previous stream, but I just want to talk about, so community, much bigger than what I imagined in the book. Like you can see beyond, like pretty far. And that right at the end of the book, they talk a little bit about how far the communities are apart. So you really don't know how long Jonas rides for before he gets to the snowy place with the sled. Right? Like it's kind of strange. Also, he doesn't take pills. There's his little house, very modern. It's actually kind of cool. I kind of like the way the house looks and the community looks. It is kind of nice. But they also take injections. They don't take pills. They do injections. They get an injection on their wrist or something. So there's no pills involved in this community. There's more high-tech ways to stop them from. So how does Jonas stop taking the pills, right? Like in the movie, he stops taking, or in the book, he stops taking the pills. But in the movie, how would he stop taking an injection? You know, how would he fake, oh yeah, I took my injection. Like, no worries. Like he would have to like put something else on the injection thing to like fake an injection. Okay.
Injected.
Serene, beautiful places where disorder became harmony.
Everyone's wearing the same thing. Everyone looks the same.
Do you know how to fly those?
Absolutely. Do you get to fly to the edge?
Oh, yeah.
What's past there?
Don't know. We're not allowed to fly past that.
Let's go.
It's against the rules, Jonas.
Also, Asher becomes a pilot. Asher's not a pilot. This whole conversation is completely made up. This does not happen in the book. Okay, let's keep going. the annex room with the giver. Very
They're
cool.
called books.
All the books.
Hello? My name...
I know who you are.
Who are you?
The giver. When the elders need guidance, I provide wisdom using memories of the past. Our world was different. There was more.
More?
Much more.
Right.
You'll see them all in time. All colors, all differences. Our people chose to do away with emotions. Those morning injections take them away.
When people have the freedom to choose, they choose wrong.
Okay, so a lot of this is the same, right? So far, right? The giver is explaining this all to Jonas about like the colors and the memories and all that kind of stuff. And he starts to see the colors. He sees Fiona's red hair. He sees the apple. So it's all very similar. The only thing that's kind of different so far is the injections, right? And Jonas is the giver in the movie. The giver says, "Oh, the injections take away emotions." Like he doesn't ever say that the pills take away emotions in the book. I don't think, right? He doesn't ever mention. I mean, he talks about the pills, but like it's really just for the stirrings. It's not for just emotions in general. Although it probably does inhibit some kind of emotions. But you also see Lily, right? Let's back up real quick. You also see Lily, Jonas's younger sister, getting an injection. She's way too young. She is way too young to be receiving an injection. Okay, yeah, I know. Yeah, she's way too young to be receiving an injection. She shouldn't be. This is not right. This is wrong. I don't like it. Okay, sorry, I gotta get my thing back here. Perfect. Here we go. All right, keep going.
Take them away.
When people have the freedom to choose, they choose wrong.
Tomorrow morning, skip your injection. I've been doing it for months. What do you feel?
He's not usually like this.
I'm surprised.
What? Wait a minute. When does Jonas kiss a girl? That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. He's trying to convince Fiona to stop taking the injections. No, I don't like that. Listen, the book is not supposed to have any romance. I don't like it. The book is not supposed to have any romance. Like he mentions having a feelings for Fiona, but he literally goes as far as saying his female friend, right? That's as far as he goes to mention Fiona in any sort of like romantic way. This makes me mad. I don't like it. You're inserting romance where it doesn't need to be inserted. Also, we find out how Jonas fakes his injections. He uses an apple, right, to fake. So using the symbol of the apple, that's kind of cool, right? Like, the apple from the book is really interesting. So like the apple in the injection in the movie, I guess, is more powerful. But it's not personally my favorite choice here. And him trying to like convince Fiona, being like, skip your injections, do it together with me. Like it's not how it goes. Also, Jonas is not 16. He is not this old. Okay, Jonas is supposed to be 12. Okay, he and Fiona are supposed to be 12 years old, not however old this guy is. I just we're talking. We gotta be serious about our books to movie adaptations here, you guys. Okay, he kisses her.
You're not more worried about him. I would be. Bring up Jonas's activity.
He's inquisitive.
You should know better than anyone.
The way things
Also,
look-
that never happens, right? The chief elder never goes to speak to the giver or monitors Jonas's behavior. They don't even pay attention to him at all. Right. Him trying to convince his friends to leave, yes. And like, I guess, yeah, like he does try to do something with them, like tries to show them memories, but he's not trying to like get them to leave with him, right? Like, cause the giver's told him like so many times, like they live a different life than we do, right? Like they don't have memories for feelings. They don't have this kind of stuff. So I get why they're trying to make it like more interesting, like more of like a tension building, like what's going to happen kind of stuff. I get that. I just feel like it's unnecessary romance. Like I'm even looking at I'm going to show this. I'm even looking at the like soundtrack. Oh, I can't show this. Oh, well, I'm looking at the soundtrack image right now because I had it on earlier. And the picture is Jonas and, okay, sorry. There we go. Did I mess up? I think I might have messed up. I did. I'm sorry, everybody. I'll come back. Okay, we're going back. Okay, yeah, perfect. So yeah, so I'm looking at the picture from the soundtrack, and it's him, and I think it's supposed to be Fiona. I think it's supposed to be him and Fiona, like, on the cover, but she's not even a main character. Like, why would you put them both on the cover? Like, she's not even she's not even a main character. She's not even a big part of the book. The only thing about her is her red hair, and Jonas likes her. That's the only two things. That's it, right? And she and Asher are in every scene together. So it's not like he ever gets any time alone with her. It's just stupid, dumb. I don't like it. I just take it out, and then it's fine, okay? Just take out the unnecessary romance, and we'll be okay. That's just how I personally feel. If you have a different thought, don't be afraid to express it, okay? Everybody's different. Everyone has unique ideas, but I'm just saying it's bad, okay? I'm saying I don't like it, and I don't know, it just doesn't work for me.
Look and the way things are very different. Watch.
That's my father.
There is no way for me to prepare you for the truth.
Also, why is his father releasing some adult? He's not releasing a baby. He's releasing an adult. And his dad looks scary, right? His dad looks even like...
No way.
Who is that? What is that actor's name? Let me find out. Wait. I don't want to ruin Taylor Swift's role. So hang on. What is that actor's name? Okay, I know who Brendan Thwaites is, but... Darn it. Skarsgård, right? Some kind of It's one of the Skarsgård brothers, I'm pretty sure. Someone help me out here. Yeah, okay, it is Alexander Skarsgård. Okay, he's so creepy. Thank you, Miss Golden. Yeah. He is so creepy. Look at how creepy he is. Why is he wearing that? What is his job? He's not a nurturer. This does not look like a nurturer. What is he? Is he a security guard? Because that just seems like you're just trying to like change unnecessary things. Like I don't know. I feel like, okay, maybe they didn't want to show somebody killing a baby in the movie. I get that. I can understand that. I can appreciate it. I can respect it. I just don't know how I feel about it. And who is this supposed to be? Is this supposed to be Fiona? Is Fiona supposed to get like in trouble and almost get released? Now I told you I watched the movie and I actually don't remember. Maybe I stopped watching it in the middle because I hated it so much. That's a possibility. I might have stopped watching this because I didn't like it. But I also don't like this. I don't like this plot point. No, this isn't real. This is probably not in the movie.
From the truth.
He killed him.
The young and the old are killed.
For the good of all of us.
There are things you don't know.
You're scaring me.
Go back to your family unit.
It isn't my family, and neither is yours.
Jonas has become dangerous.
This doesn't happen.
There's something more. Something that has been stolen.
Does he convince Fiona? Wait a minute. This has changed the whole plot has been changed. This is not the same at all. Nothing is the same. Okay, so the only thing that seems to be the same is the communities and like the basic setting of the Giver, because none of this seems to be. It seems almost like he's convinced Fiona to like get back her, I don't know, her memories or the memories or something. And now she's being released because she wants the memories. Or maybe they're threatening her with release. And so she'll tell on Jonas. This has turned into a whole espionage thing that is not prevalent in the book at all. I almost make it, to me, it almost seems more believable that the committee of elders would be dumb to Jonas. Like, it seems more realistic to me that they would be like, oh, he's the new receiver in Traving. We got to leave him alone. We don't want to know anything about what his training is. So we're just going to let him do his own thing. Right. Like, because I don't know, that just seems more believable because they wouldn't want to know. They wouldn't. They would be like, we don't want to talk about this. Like, we don't want to involve ourselves with the memories. We don't want to involve ourselves with the pain and the suffering. Right. Even if they know what it is. Right. I don't know.
Comfortable?
Jonas,
Too dramatic.
There has to be a way to show them.
you can stop this. You can change things.
And wait. People
Stop
are
this.
watching the release? This doesn't happen. How do they... okay, so this must be the committee of elders because there's the Giver, right? Here's the Giver, and here's the chief elder, Meryl Streep, and they're watching it. I'm confused. This is confusing. I'm confused.
You could change things.
Okay, riding on the bicycle.
I want you to fight him.
Who did he just fight? Who did he just
And
punch?
I want you to lose him.
Okay, so much to talk about here. So much to talk about. Okay, so they watch. Let's do this real quick. They watch Fiona about to be released, right? And the giver's like, you can change it, right? We can change it. That's the same. This is the same. Him riding through the forest and the fields, like the desert. The road is bumpy. There's no more road. But then he fights. Who is this? Is that Asher? Did he just fight Asher? And then the chief elder tells Asher, go find him? Like, when did that happen? I don't know if I like this. I feel like the book did a good enough job that it didn't have to have all of these unnecessary changes. I don't know. How do you feel? How do you feel about this? Maybe they did it. Maybe it's good. Maybe it is better. Maybe I'm silly. But it just feels like it's unnecessary changes that are happening in this movie that don't need to happen. I feel like it's just as intense if you just leave everybody else out of it. I don't know. But I guess they also wanted to make everybody have a bigger role in the plot. Maybe, right? It does increase the tension, I guess. But and then him falling in the waterfall. That too. Him falling in the waterfall. Does he fall in the waterfall? He sees a waterfall. He doesn't fall in the waterfall, though. And if they change the ending, man, I don't know. If they change the ending, I really am not going to like this movie. Because now I can't remember what happens at the end. So there's a chance that I didn't watch the whole movie. There's a chance that I skipped watching the whole movie because I hated all the changes that they made. By the way, just as a reminder, you didn't see her in the trailer, but she is in the movie. Taylor Swift is definitely in this movie. Just putting a heads up there. If you want to spoil it for yourself, you can go look at the cast on IMDb. But she does play I thought she played a more significant role than Asher. That's for sure. That's disappointing. That is just disappointing. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on our final reading of The Giver. I really enjoyed it. I love this book. So if you didn't like it, it's okay. I understand. But just, know that I loved it. So we're going to disagree. I love the whole series, too. So if you liked this book and you want to know what happens to Jonas and to Gabriel, I highly recommend reading the second book, Gathering Blue, and the third and the fourth. The third book is called Messenger, and the fourth book is called Sun. I think really quickly I can pull up the books again, just one last time on Lois Lowry's website. Here we go. And I will say that the timeline for the books is not chronological, right? It doesn't go from like a chronological order. Like the first book starts at the beginning and then the next book continues and the third book continues. Like it's very different of a narrative in the way that the books are set up. So let's see. Okay, yeah. So in The Giver, you obviously have The Giver. And then the second book happens at the same time as The Giver. So Gathering Blue is like a side story about the same kind of world that Jonas is in, but in a different area of the world. And so they're happening at the same time. And then Messenger continues off from Gathering Blue, right? So they almost like converge, right? You could say that The Giver and Messenger, Giver and Gathering Blue converge in Messenger. And in the Sun, it goes. So like you have Giver, Gathering Blue, Messenger, and then you have Sun, which is like a third story. So if like I had a third hand, I don't. So like, okay, so let me do this. So you have Giver, Gathering Blue, and then Messenger is up here, it connects them, and then Sun is like another story, and it goes all the way past Messenger and then converges at the end. So it's actually like a really cool way that the story is told. It's very different You know, it's very different. Okay, so yeah, thank you again for watching. Thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you have a fabulous Saturday. And I hope you enjoy this book. I hope you go read the rest of the books because they're awesome. And yeah, all right, have a great day. I'll see you in class or I'll see you someplace else. Bye. Bye, everybody. Oh, let me turn on some music to exit you guys out. Not going to listen to the Giver soundtrack. I'm totally against that movie now that I've picked it apart and said I hated it so much. Hello? Are you playing? Oh, there we go. Okay, now for real, goodbye. For real, goodbye. Have a fabulous Saturday. See you guys later. Enjoy.